Chapter 509. Mengdu and Gue Du wanted to destroy Wangdu. Unfortunately, Sumo, who had just returned, had completely changed the situation. In the end, the cultivators of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital were completely annihilated. Not a single one of them managed to escape. At this time, Sumo led the Wangdu cultivators towards Mengdu. In fact, it had been less than an hour since Sumo returned to Mengdu. Currently, Dream Capital and Ghost City did not know about the Forgotten Capital. The cultivators of the two cities were still looking forward to the so-called good news. Initially, they thought that they would be able to destroy the Forgotten Capital. With the four great divine tribulations keeping watch, even if there were some small twists and turns, it would be enough to deal with them. However, things had definitely exceeded their expectations. The flames of war were vast and mighty. When the cultivators guarding the city of Mengdu saw Sumo and the other for the first time, they thought that the Mengdu cultivators had returned triumphantly. However, they soon discovered that something was amiss. Something was wrong with his aura, because the murderous aura was rising like a beacon. In an instant, someone in the Dream Capital sounded the alarm. After all, there was actually a late-stage deity tribulation cultivator in the Dream Capital. He was the hidden power of the Dream Capital. For many years, he rarely showed his face. Put the entire city on lockdown. Stand guard. Open the city, protecting Grand Array. The deity tribulation cultivator directly issued a series of orders. Other than Yu Jiqing, there were a total of 8 elders in the Dream Capital. Among them, had followed Yu Jiqing to participate in the Battle of Forgotten City. Of course, all of them had perished. However, there were still 4 elders guarding Mengdu. They were all great perfection of the soul transformation realm. From this point alone, Mengdu's strength was above Wangdu's. Moreover, the Dream Capital was 3 times the size of the Forgotten Capital. His population and the number of cultivators was higher than Wangdu today. Sumo and the others came suddenly, and it was unknown how many traveling cultivators were still in the city. The 4 Grand Elders were all male cultivators, and they reacted with incredible speed. The protective array of the Dream Capital was instantly activated. With the late-stage deity Tribulation Cultivator as the leader, the main cultivators of Mengdu gathered on top of the city wall, just like Elder Wangdu and the others. Who are you? The late-stage deity Tribulation of Meng Capital was a middle-aged cultivator in a red robe. He was tall and sturdy, and had a dignified appearance. At this moment, even though he had a premonition that everything was bad, his expression didn't change. Avenger. The black aura on Sumo's body had yet to dissipate. Her tone was deep and cold. We are cultivators of Wangdu. Today, we are here to avenge all the cultivators who died in Wangdu. Forgetful cultivator. Sumo. At this moment, the cultivators of Dream Capital had seen everything clearly. Many of them knew each other, especially Jin Manang, Hualing Jun, and Kong Fongzi. How could the elders of Mengdu not recognize them? Many of them had seen Sumo when they had gambled on the Supreme Great Spirit or legend has it that Sumo is a deity tribulation cultivator. However, at this moment, they all felt an ominous pressure. Sumo was back. However, in theory, it shouldn't be like this. Mengdu had just sent out a mid-stage deity tribulation cultivator. Now, less than an hour had passed, and there was no response. How did the Wangdu cultivators arrive at the city gate? All the cultivators felt a chill run down their spines. Unless, however, they didn't dare to think about it. More importantly, they felt that it was impossible. Mengdu had sent out 3,000 cultivators. How could not a single one return? Moreover, there were still Ghost Capital cultivators. Mengdu and Ghost Capital joined forces to attack Wangdu, unless Ghost Capital changed sides? In an instant, this seemingly reasonable speculation occupied the hearts of the cultivators of Dream Capital. Where is Elder Yu? The late-stage deity tribulation cultivator asked. Dead. Annihilated. Sumo's tone was calmer, as if she was talking about an ant dying. What about the other 3,000 cultivators of my Dream Capital? The late-stage deity tribulation cultivator asked again. Dead. Not a single one left. Sumo's lips curled up. At that moment, he suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of joy. Perhaps it was the remnant of an evil thought in the depths of his soul. Slaughter. This made Sumo feel happy. Ha! That deity tribulation cultivator didn't get angry. Instead, he looked up to the sky and laughed. Elder Su, you really talk big? The cultivators of my 3,000 dream capital are all elites. Even if Ghost Capital changes sides, you don't have the ability to kill them all. Are you lying to a 3-year-old child? Hee hee. Sumo sneered. Ghost Capital did not change sides. You think too much, because there is not a single cultivator of Ghost Capital left. Our Wangdu City will not favor one and discriminate against the other. After destroying Dream Capital, we will go to Ghost Capital. However, your words reminded me, Sumo said slowly, there are still children in Wangdu City. After saying that, the black gas on Sumo's body slightly dispersed, and then the pressure on her body instantly dispersed. Undying pressure. The cultivators of Dream Capital suddenly changed their expressions. Among them, some immediately realized that Sumo was an undying cultivator, and from the feeling, she was not at the early stage of undying. Everyone in Dream Capital, listen up. Today, Wangdu City is here for revenge. Mortals are exempt from death. Among the cultivators, those who surrender will not be killed. Those who don't surrender, regardless of gender, as long as they have reached the chi refining stage, will not be spared. Non-cultivators of Dream Capital, as long as you do not participate in the war, please leave the city. I will give you the time it takes for a joss stick to burn. Once the time is up, we will immediately attack the city. If innocent people are harmed, leave it to fate. With a wave of her hand, Sumo really took out a long joss stick and directly lit it. The smoke was thick, but it seemed to be pressing. Sumo's voice was like thunder, rolling endlessly. At this moment, the people of Wangdu City were already in a panic, and everyone's expression changed. The development of the situation was beyond everyone's expectations. The cultivator armies of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital were all destroyed, although this news sounded extremely unreal. However, if it was not true, why would the cultivators of Wangdu City attack the city? Sumo, don't you try to mislead the people. People of Dream Capital do not panic. The late-stage deity tribulation cultivator was actually not confident, but he had to stabilize the morale of the army. Ha ha ha. Sumo looked up to the sky and laughed. Mislead the people? What a joke. If I want to destroy Dream Capital, it will be as easy as flipping my hand. This is the last chance I will give everyone. Whoosh! With that, Sumo shook one of her hands. 2 purple-clothed puppets already flew out. Tao Yao and the life and death puppet instantly appeared in the sky above Dream Capital. They were already god-burying puppets. Under Sumo's command, the pressure on their bodies slightly dissipated. Boom! A corner of Dream Capital instantly collapsed. In fact, Dream Capital's great formation was stronger than Wangdu City's. However, the level of the siege was different. How could god-burying energy be compared to deity tribulation and soul disintegration? The great formation was broken. Naturally, the cultivators in Dream Capital immediately repaired it. However, that scene shocked all the cultivators of Dream Capital, because they had no idea what level of power that was. Purple clothes fluttered in the wind. Tao Yao and the life and death puppet did not take off their hoods. The cultivators of Dream Capital could not even see their faces clearly and did not know that they were puppets. The cultivators of Wangdu City, on the other hand, were ecstatic. As for the purple-clothed puppet, Sumo had already left one in Wangdu City. Just now, they all saw King Mu destroy the purple-clothed puppet in Ghost City with one sword strike. Great Elder is invincible, they silently said in their hearts. At this moment, only half of the incense stick remained. Chapter 510. The air was filled with the fragrance of smoke. At this time, Sumo, Zhao Xiao, Tao Yao, and the life and death cultivators had completely sealed off the Dream Capital. They did not set up any formation, But the crushing pressure was enough to trap the dream capital cultivators in the city, making it impossible for them to escape. The time it took for an incense stick to burn passed quickly. Sumo's words and the collapse of a corner of the city had shaken the confidence of some dream capital cultivators. The situation in the dream capital was different from the forgotten capital. The danger came very suddenly, unlike the forgotten capital, which had a warning. Therefore, it could be said that the dream capital cultivators were not prepared at all. All of a sudden, they did not have the heart to defend and were more concerned about how to save their lives. Moreover, there were indeed many foreign cultivators in the dream capital. Of course, they did not want to get involved in this mess. Therefore, as soon as Sumo's voice fell, dozens of rays of light rose into the sky. White Moon Sect Cultivator Xiaolan, Water Cloud Pavilion Cultivator Meng Yusi, Cloud Swallow Country Cultivator Ouyang Jian. Those cultivators reported their sect name one by one and took out their identity tokens, and so on. Among them, the highest level was the middle stage of deity tribulation, and the lowest was the middle stage of nascent soul. In a short while, hundreds of people rose into the air. Sumo did not stop them. After sending people to verify, they were all allowed to go. The dream capital cultivators looked at this scene with even more complicated expressions. In fact, many cultivators were secretly envious, but unfortunately, they did not have proof. The hundreds of foreign cultivators dispersed in an instant. Under the pressure of Sumo and the others, they did not even have the mood to watch the show. It was not a good place to stay for long. Sumo looked at everything coldly. There was only an inch left of the incense stick. He could feel that there were already cultivators in the dream capital ready to make a move. The elders at the top of the forgotten capital's city wall had ashen faces. They would never surrender. There were also death warriors in the dream capital. However, they could feel the emotions around them. Many cultivators in the dream capital were wavering in their hearts. Fight or surrender. This feeling was extremely fatal. There was only half an inch left of the incense stick in the air, and it was about to burn out. The world seemed to be silent. However, the entire dream capital was filled with endless pressure. Elder Su, I surrender. An early-stage soul transformation realm cultivator suddenly shouted from the top of the dream capital. He was a relatively young cultivator. Just now, he was standing next to the collapsed corner of the city wall. The pressure from the purple-clothed man almost forced him to the bottom of the city. At this moment, he still had lingering fears. That was a power that the dream capital could not resist. He believed that all the cultivators who attacked Mingdu had been annihilated. That purple-robed cultivator was enough to kill them. There was no need for anything else. That was the absolute suppression of realms. Between life and death, he wanted to choose life. After all, he was still young. However, as soon as that soul transformation cultivator said the word surrender, the flying sword of the late-stage deity, tribulation, realm elder from the dream capital city had already pierced his forehead. Bang! The head of the young soul transformation realm cultivator exploded. The corpse fell to the ground and instantly turned into a bloody mist. The cultivators on both sides of him couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. They forcefully swallowed the word surrender that was about to come out of their mouths. The red-robed deity tribulation realm elder shouted coldly, "Cultivators of the dream capital, those who dare to surrender die. Kill 1 to warn 100. For a moment, the entire dream capital was solemn. He couldn't let the dream capital surrender without a fight. The dream capital was one of the 3 capitals of the chaotic gods' southern region. Under the joint efforts of the ghost capital and the dream capital, the forgotten capital had lasted for more than 3 months. Today, if the dream capital surrendered, how would the cultivators of the dream capital have the face to walk the chaotic gods' continent? They would rather die than surrender. The late-stage deity tribulation realm elder's cheeks tightened. He would rather kill them with his own hands. Whoosh! In the void, the last bit of ash dissipated. Sumo looked at the deity tribulation realm elder and smiled faintly. Fellow deity tribulation realm cultivator, You are pushing your people to death. Kill. Sumo's brows suddenly furrowed. Boom, crack. This time, neither Sumo nor Zhao Xiao made a move, because two god-burying puppets were enough to crush everything. The Reaper of Life and Death didn't split into two, but the yin-yang primal chaos banner was already in his hand. Although the ancient banner was a replica, it was enough to attack an undying gray defensive array. The Reaper of Life and Death swung the banner down and broke a corner of the formation. This time, the Reaper of Life and Death didn't give the Dream Capital cultivators a chance to repair the formation. Whoosh, whoosh, the yin-yang primal chaos banner shook, releasing an endless amount of gray energy. At the same time, his god-burying power spread out again. Boom, boom, rumble. The Dream Capital cultivators originally wanted to rely on the formation to hold on for a while. However, the formation couldn't withstand a single blow from the Reaper of Life and Death and crumbled in an instant. The yin-yang primal chaos banner fluttered up and down, unstoppable. Kikik, kiki, Tao Yao's eerie laughter resounded. To the Dream Capital cultivators, it sounded like the laughter of a demon from hell. Tao Yao flicked his sleeve. Purplish-red flames filled the sky. This was an indiscriminate attack. All the cultivators on the walls of the Dream Capital were instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. All of them took out their magic treasures, but their magic treasures were useless against the heavenly peach fire. All magic treasures were fuel. Kikik, kiki. Tao Yao's laughter made people's souls numb and uneasy. The only remaining late-stage deity, Tribulation Elder of the Dream Capital, wanted to fight to the death to boost morale. However, Tao didn't give him the chance. In fact, in front of Tao Yao and the Reaper of Life and Death puppets, the deity Tribulation Cultivator didn't have the qualifications to fight to the death. With a flick of his purple robe, Tao Yao's withered arm reached out. All obstructions were futile. Chi. Tao Yao's withered arm directly pierced the deity Tribulation Cultivator's immortal heart. The gap between realms couldn't be bridged. At the last moment, the deity Tribulation Elder was still staring with wide eyes. Perhaps he only wanted to see if the person under the purple robe was a human or a demon. Why did the opponent reach out with a withered arm? However, he couldn't see it. Puff! Whoosh! The corpse of the Dream Capital Elder instantly burned. On the other side, the four elders of the Dream Capital had all died under the yin-yang primal chaos banner. This was even more bloody and cruel than when the Ghost Capital and Dream Capital broke through the formation of the Dream Capital. The two purple-robed puppets didn't even need to use their full strength to kill everything. And the Forget Capital cultivators who came with Sumo didn't need to do anything. They just stood in the air, squinting at everything. They were the witnesses of everything that had happened. The destruction of the Dream Capital signaled the rise of the Forget Capital. Surrender. We surrender. Inside the Forgotten Capital, a small number of Dream Capital cultivators were shouting, because they didn't have any power to resist. In the sea of fire, they struggled. Sumo stood in the air with his hands behind his back, looking down on everything like a god. However, his face didn't show much expression. Other than Zhao Xiao, it was the first time the cultivators of the Forget Capital saw Sumo like this. Hearing those shouts, Sumo's expression didn't change, because the cultivator who didn't descend from the Dream Capital directly killed them. That was another kind of cruelty. Sumo lightly turned around and rushed in the direction of the Ghost Capital. I gave Dream Capital a chance. It's too late. Sumo's voice was emotionless. According to what I said, other than mortals, male or female, as long as they reach the Qi refinement realm, leave no one alive. Tao Yao, King Mu, destroy this city and follow me immediately. Kong Fangzi, take the disciples and stay in Dream Capital for now. The rest, follow me to the Ghost Capital. Yes. In the air, everyone responded. Kong Fangzi stayed with a dozen disciples. The others followed Sumo. Sumo slowly walked at the front. Their next target, of course, was the Ghost Capital. At that moment, Sumo remembered the painting in Mu Jinghong's cave. Xiao Luo's feet were piles of bones. When a general succeeds, thousands of bones wither. All of this was just the beginning. Chapter 511. Ghost Metropolis was also known as Ghost City. The entire Ghost Metropolis was about the same size as Forgotten Capital. Among the three capitals of the southern region, Dream Capital was the largest. Ghost Metropolis and Forgotten Capital added together were not as big as Dream Capital. The entire city of Ghost Metropolis was made of black stones and looked like a single entity. The dark city gave people a strange and oppressive feeling. The city wall emitted a faint light. Within the light, there were runes shining. At this time, Sumo and Zhao Xiao had brought Forgotten Capital cultivators to the void of Ghost Metropolis. This was Sumo's second time in Ghost Metropolis, and Ghost Metropolis was dead silent. At that moment, this reminded Sumo of Desolate Sea Divine State's Blackwater Ghost City. Between worlds, there were always many similar places and similar people. When destroying Dream Capital, Sumo let many chaotic god cultivators go. So, Ghost Metropolis had time to know everything. Ghost Metropolis must have known about Forgotten Capital and Dream Capital. The soldiers were at the city gate, but Ghost Metropolis was silent. It was waiting for everything. At this time, it was already midnight. Ghost Metropolis was like a dead man lying deep on the ground. On top of the city wall, there was no sign of any cultivators. The entire night was very oppressive. This city is extraordinary. Zhao Xiao narrowed his eyes. Its defensive formation is not something Dream Capital can compare to. It seems to be a god burying level defense. Although Zhao Xiao's cultivation was only at undying middle stage, he had a soul comparable to a venerable. Dragon Saliva's insight was definitely not bad. Yes, Sumo nodded. Now, he had awakened his memories. Seeing Ghost Metropolis today was completely different from seeing Ghost Metropolis in the past. Back then, Sumo felt that the layout of Ghost Metropolis was very special. Today, when he looked again, the entire Ghost Metropolis was actually a special human shape. It was like a person lying face down on the ground, and then stretched into the shape of that city had a head, a body, and 4 limbs. After looking, Sumo laughed coldly. Dragon Saliva, it seems that we have to do something big here. This Ghost Metropolis is backed by Corpseless Sect. Oh, Zhao Xiao was slightly stunned. He did not understand all this. However, he certainly knew how powerful the Corpseless Sect was. This city used to belong to Yi Wu Hui. Sumo paused. Miss Ye's city? Only now did Zhao Xiao recall that he seemed to have heard Sumo and Yi Wu Hui mention a place on the 18th level of the Underworld City, the Ghost City's pavilion of all life. However, he didn't care about it that time. Then what do we do? Zhao Xiao asked. There's no mistake. Suemo said calmly. You know Miss Ye's situation. This city probably didn't belong to her anymore. Otherwise, the ghost capital would never attack. Wangdu understood. Zhao Xiao nodded. Who? At this moment, 2 purple-robed figures appeared in the void. Tao Yao and Life and Death Man had already completed the Dream Capital Destruction battle. At this moment, it was the same as when they dealt with the Dream Capital. Sumo, Zhao Xiao, Tao Yao, and Life and Death Man's pressure had already enveloped the entire Ghost City. The undying pressure and burying God pressure were actually a huge pressure to the Ghost Metropolis. However, the Ghost Capital did not react at all. It was like a dead city. To be honest, this situation was something Sumo did not expect. The Ghost City's stance was probably a form of absolute defense. Puppet City? Sumo's heart skipped a beat. The Ghost Capital's elder, Old Ghost, was a cultivator puppet. All the cultivators he brought were also puppets. Could it be that the entire city was a puppet as well? In fact, if not for the fact that Yi Wu Hui's soul needed rest, he really wanted to wake him up and ask him what was going on. Sumo pondered. At the same time, he had Tao Yao and Life and Death Man attack. Who? Tao Yao waved her sleeves and cast a spell. A purplish-red flame appeared above her head and became bigger and bigger. The scorching heat wave burned people's bodies. Tao Yao waved her sleeves again. That huge fireball, like the setting sun, directly smashed toward the ghost city. At that moment, divine fire descended from the heavens. Boom, boom, rumble. In an instant, there was a series of explosions. The entire ghost city emitted multicolored light. All the ghost capital cultivators in the air felt the shockwave. Tao Yao's spell was of the burial god level. If it attacked the dream capital, it would be enough to break its defensive formation. However, the ghost city seemed to be shaking. Then, the colorful light dissipated and the spiritual power disappeared. The ghost city was still the ghost city, unharmed. This scene caused the ghost capital cultivators in the air to change their expressions. This was in stark contrast to the dream capital just now. One should know that after Sumo summoned the two purple-clothed puppets, everything went smoothly. They destroyed the entire dream capital in less than a quarter of an hour. However, against the ghost capital, they were stopped at the first move. It seemed like they were at a disadvantage. However, Sumo's lips curled. All of this was within his expectations. How could a burial god-level defense be broken so easily? Attack the city with all your might, Sumo said in a low voice. Boom, crack, boom. At Sumo's command, Tao Yao and the life and death cultivators took turns attacking the ghost capital. Beams of light shot up into the sky. The two god-burying puppets' attacks caused the entire ground to tremble. The cultivators of the ghost capital watched on in awe. The southern domain of the chaotic gods was a very ordinary place on the chaotic gods' mainland. There were almost no burial god cultivators. Now, the two burial god puppets were unleashing their abilities. This was truly earth-shattering. As the spells continued to fall, everything within a few hundred miles of the ghost city was razed to the ground. The ghost capital cultivators in the air began to retreat. Otherwise, they would be injured by the shockwaves of the spells. Even a sliver of the burial god's power could kill them. Sumo and Zhao Xiao stood at the forefront of the cultivators. Their expressions were very calm. A battle of this level was actually nothing in their eyes. After all, they had witnessed the destruction of a continent or a world. Boom, boom, the attacks were relentless. The entire southern domain of the chaotic god's mainland had been alarmed by this battle. The cultivators of the chaotic god realm, who had left the dream capital, had already spread the news of what had happened. However, no one in the entire chaotic god's mainland was willing to get involved in a burial god battle. An hour went by. Tao Yao and the life and death cultivators' attacks did not stop. The cultivators of the ghost capital wore serious expressions. In their eyes, the ghost city did not seem to have changed at all. It's about to fall. Zhao Xiao's lips curled into a smile. This was because he saw a trace of bloody light appearing in a corner of the ghost capital. Sumo nodded. Boom, bang. As the two conversed, Tao Yao and the life and death cultivators attacked again. The sky was filled with colorful lights. The scene was very similar to the destruction of the Forgetting Capital formation. Sumo was dazed for a moment. It was the same feeling he had when he stepped out of the Forgetting Capital's teleportation formation and saw the formation shattering. He could not describe it, but it was a feeling that had been hidden in the depths of his soul. Roar! The moment the formation shattered, the entire ghost capital let out a muffled roar. Then, the entire city began to tremble and gather. It was slowly climbing to its feet. Chapter 512. When a person stands up, you won't feel anything, but when a city stands up, you will definitely be shocked. Even if you are a powerful cultivator. Other than Sumo and Zhao Xiao, all the cultivators of Wangdu City are deeply shocked by this scene. The ghost capital is slowly standing up. Hua! The cultivators of Wangdu City immediately spread out, but they're all staring at the ghost capital. Wu roar! The earth is shaking, the void is trembling. The black ghost city is really condensing into a human shape, but it is still extremely huge. Within a radius of 100 miles, it was like a monster. This scene is deeply imprinted in the minds of the Wangdu cultivators. So, it is. Sumo looks at the black giant that has instantly become several hundred zhang tall, sneering. The ghost capital is really a puppet city. The entire city is a puppet. Among the worlds, Probably only the corpse-less sect can do this. God burying late stage. Zhao Xiao squints her eyes. Dark Supreme, your two puppets don't seem to be of a high enough level. They most likely won't be able to stop this puppet city. No matter. Sumo nods. I have my own methods. How can we let a ghost city puppet cause a storm? Kill. With Sumo's order, Tao Yao and Life and Death Man are already charging at the ghost city puppet. Tao Yao's flames instantly turn into 100 zhong long dragon that coils around the puppet. Boom, boom. The blazing dragon continued to attack the ghost city puppet. The ghost city puppet is slowly moving its arms, seemingly slow, but it is actually extremely fast. The energy in the void is rumbling. An invisible force is pushing all the cultivators away. Chi, boom. The ghost city puppet waved one of its hands, and like a huge black sword, it split the sky. Tao Yao's flame dragon is directly scattered. At the same time, everyone can finally see the ghost city puppet's face. It is a puppet made of stone, but it is extremely huge. Its head was the size of a small mountain. On top of the small mountain, there are two old mansions with bright lights. They look like the ghost city puppet's eyes. Inside the old mansions, there seems to be a human figure moving. Woo, roar. The ghost city puppet faced the sky and roared angrily. The might of the burial god was insufferably arrogant. Sumo's hand seal changed. In the blink of an eye, Tao Yao and Life and Death transformed into their 300-meter tall bodies. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a match for him at all. At this moment, if one were to look from hundreds of miles away, they would be able to see the shocking scene. The void was like an ocean. They fought in the sea. Sumo and Zhao Xiao couldn't help but take a few steps back. The Wangdu cultivators didn't even dare to move forward. They all retreated and even began to summon their defensive artifacts. The living and dead beings had been split into two. Each of them controlled two chaos streamers, one yin and one yang, to fly up and down. Peach Blossom and the two life and death immortals surrounded the ghost city puppet in a triangular formation. The battle between god-burying experts caused the entire void to shatter. The ghost city puppet's movements were slightly clumsy, but was extremely powerful. With a wave of its hand, it could create an endless spiritual energy hurricane. With a stomp of its foot, it could cause the earth to crack. Although Peach Blossom and Life and Death Man were also god-bearing puppets, they were slightly inferior in terms of grade. Not to mention, in order to break the city barrier formation, they had expended a lot of energy. For a moment, Peach Blossom and Life and Death Man could only barely resist the ghost city puppet. Roar! The ghost city puppet became more and more courageous as it fought. Sumo and Zhao Xiao watched everything coldly. They had their own plans in their hearts. Ghost city puppet, don't kill. At this moment, a buzzing sound came from the ghost city puppet's body. That voice was deep and resounding. The echo was powerful and very real. There must be other cultivators inside the ghost city, whether they were real cultivators or puppets. This ghost city was probably controlled by someone. Those who surrender will not be killed. Sumo sneered. Ghost city cultivators, today this city will be destroyed in my hands, and I won't give you the chance to surrender. King Mu's puppet was not here. Otherwise, he could be considered the strongest among the three purple-clothed puppets. However, Sumo still had a trick up his sleeve. He slapped his storage pouch. Roar! A ray of white light suddenly flew out. The white light landed on the ground and instantly grew to 100 zhong. At that moment, the cultivators of Forgotten Capital were slightly startled. This was because they saw the skeleton of a huge ancient beast. Dracophant soul-devouring beast. Among the cultivators present, some recognized the skeleton. However, they had never seen an adult Dracophant soul-devouring beast before. Roar! The Dracophant soul-devouring beast roared toward the sky again. A late-stage soul-burying realm divine beast. However, only Sumo knew that there was actually a little white pig hidden inside the soul-burying beast skull. At this moment, it was completely under the control of Humph. Kill this big guy. Sumo transmitted her voice. Then, I'll let you out to play. Inside the skull, The little white pig naturally heard Sumo's words. How could not try its best? Moreover, the little guy was a battle-hungry person to begin with. They were both late-stage soul-burying realm cultivators, so this battle would be the best test. Boom! Bang! The little white pig controlled the Dracophant's soul-devouring beast and directly charged toward the ghost city puppet. The two huge puppets were using the most primitive method of combat. Head-on. Boom! Bang! Bang! In an instant, they had already collided 3 times. The air trembled and the earth quaked. However, these two gigantic puppets were basically on par with each other, neither gaining an advantage over the other. For a moment, neither had the upper hand. Inside the skull, the little white pig was knocked into a daze and whimpered. However, this little guy's ferocious nature was completely stimulated. Humph! Roar! The little white pig bared its fangs, and its eyes instantly turned blood red. That feeling instantly spread throughout the Dracophant soul-devouring beast's body. Charge! The little white pig's mind moved. The Dracophant soul-devouring beast pounced toward the ghost city puppet again. One should know that they were fighting at the same level. However, the little white pig had 2 helpers. Boom! Bang! This time, both the Dracophant soul-devouring beast and the ghost city puppet were pushed back. At the same time, Tao Yao and the life and death man returned to their normal forms. Their bodies moved and went straight for the ghost city puppet's eyes. Tao Yao reached out with one hand, and a withered arm that was dozens of feet long appeared. The arm was like a halberd or a divine spear. The life and death man became one again. The yin-yang primal chaos streamer in his hand flew out like a flying sword. This was the result of Sumo's control. The ghost city puppet's eyes were like bright lanterns that flickered with human figures. Therefore, that must be its weakness. Taking advantage of the ghost city puppet's movement, Tao Yao and the life and death man instantly arrived. 2 flying swords shot out from the old mansion. However, they could not stop Tao Yao and the life and death man's attacks. The ghost city puppet was indeed powerful, but it had its weakness. It was not an existence suitable for this kind of battle. Otherwise, the ghost city puppet would not have chosen to defend from the start. Chi! Boom! Starlight flew everywhere and rubble scattered. Tao Yao and the life and death man broke through the flying swords. Then the power of the divine burial completely blew up the 2 ancient residences. Whoosh! In an instant, 5 cultivators flew out from the eyes and landed on the ghost city puppet's shoulder. Chapter 5:13. 5 cultivators, 5 god tribulations, 3 men and 2 women. They lined up on the shoulders of the ghost city puppet. Standing in the middle was a white-robed old man. The old man had white hair and a youthful face. He was hale and hearty, holding a dragon-headed walking stick. Beside him stood 2 men and 2 women. They were all middle-aged. The white-robed old man was a god tribulation paragon. The other 2 men and 2 women were late-stage god tribulation. If not for Sumo's return, with the power of the ghost city, it was enough to destroy Wong Capital or even Dream Capital. However, Sumo's appearance disrupted everything. Fellow Taoist Su, repent. The white-robed old man said, "My ghost city is not a chaotic god city. Today, you will pay for what you did. It is not too late to stop now." The white-robed old man was full of energy. His voice reverberated for 100 li. Sumo sneered, "Whether it is too late or not, you know better than me. Whether you can live or not, you know even better. So what if it is the corpseless sect? A small ghost city. Do you expect Tianfu City to descend and save you?" Tianfu? The white-clothed old man in the lead could not help but frown slightly. It seemed like he did not expect Sumo to mention Tianfu City. It seemed like Sumo was very clear about their background. "You are all cultivators' puppets," Sumo said. "To put it bluntly, you are all puppets." Oh, the 5 god tribulations were slightly stunned. "Fellow Taoist Su, you seem to know a lot of things," the white-robed old man said. "Of course," Sumo sneered. "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never lose a battle. Today is Ghost City's doomsday. From now on, there will be no Ghost City in the chaotic god southern region." With that, Sumo waved his hand coldly. He did not want to waste any more time with these so-called puppets, because it was meaningless. In Sumo's mind, they were really a bunch of puppets with no meaning of life. They were only tools of the so-called god. Whoosh, Tao Yao, life and death man, and dragon elephant soul-devouring beast moved at the same time. Howl, roar. The four burial gods battled again. The five deity tribulation cultivators of the ghost capital instantly retreated into the eye sockets of the ghost city's puppet. In fact, they were two ancient residences. However, the ancient residence had already been completely destroyed, and its defenses were gone. The five divine tribulations were the true controllers of the ghost city's puppets. Sumo was right. They were all cultivation puppets. However, they would never give up on the ghost city puppets, because they were originally a single entity. The true power of the ghost city's puppets came from all the puppets here. However, it was 3 against 1. The ghost city's puppet was no match for Sumo's puppet. Boom! Boom! Little White Pig's control of the Dracophant soul-devouring beast was completely unreasonable. It almost didn't use any spells. It just fought head-on, barbaric and effective. The two puppets collided. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed in the sky. Peach Yao and Life and Death Man unleashed their spells. Their main targets were the heads of the ghost city puppets. As for the 5 divine tribulations, they couldn't withstand it at all. Chi, chi, chi. At this time, Life and Death Man's spell directly pierced the immortal heart of a late-stage deity tribulation male cultivator. The ghost city puppet was slightly stunned when the late-stage deity tribulation cultivator died. Boom! Crack! At the same time, the Dracophant soul-devouring beast swung its tail. The tail was dozens of feet long, like a white lightning bolt. It suddenly whipped the ghost city puppet's waist. Originally, the ghost city puppet could have easily dealt with it. However, it lost a control point and couldn't help but tilt its body. How could Little White Pig let go of this chance? Oomph! Roar! Inside the skull, Little White Pig excitedly snorted. At the same time, it urged the Dracophant soul-devouring beast to slam into the ghost city puppet. This time, it was as if it was carrying Mount Tai with it, as if the void was being smashed open. Boom! Boom! In the sky, huge waves rolled in all directions. On the ground, dust rose for tens of thousands of feet. The ghost city puppet was directly slammed into the ground by the Dracophant soul-devouring beast, like a mountain crashing down. Chi, chi, Hugh. At the same time, Tao Yao's withered arm reached out again. The other late-stage deity tribulation cultivator was directly caught by her arm. With her undying power spread out, how could he escape? Crack, crack. Under Tao Yao's undying power, that deity tribulation cultivator was directly crushed into pieces. Broken puppets flew everywhere. Woo-woo. The ghost city puppet on the ground was like a monster that was beaten back to its original form. It growled as if it wanted to crawl up, but after moving twice, the ground shook like a mountain range. The earth shook, but the ghost city puppet didn't get up. Roar! The Dracophant soul-devouring beast spread its bony wings and directly circled above the ghost city. The eerie white light of the bones enveloped the entire ghost city. It was using its divine burial power to suppress the ghost city puppet. At this time, the ghost city puppet really couldn't get up. Out of the 5 deity tribulations, 2 had passed. The ghost city's puppets had already lost their most powerful controller. In its eye sockets, the white-haired old man's expression was sorrowful. He knew that the situation was hopeless. Then the dragon-head cane in his hand suddenly jabbed at his feet and suddenly turned. It was like a key to open a door. Following the white-haired old man's movement, the entire ghost city shook. Hugh kill. In an instant, the ghost city seemed to have returned to its original form. The city turned into a city. The houses turned into houses. Inside the city, over 1,000 cultivators instantly flew out, but there were no deity tribulation cultivators among them. Most of them wore black clothes, but their appearances were different. However, their eyes were a bit dull. Puppets. Sumo's eyes narrowed. All the cultivators in the ghost city were puppets. Kill. With Sumo's order, her 3 divine burial puppets naturally wouldn't be polite. At the same time, Sumo once again took out the ancient mortal fan. Tao Yao's fire, the life and death banner. They could use both to attack indiscriminately. Red light, purple smoke, gray air, all of them soared to the sky. The undying power and divine burial power were like dragons. The Ghost City was becoming the second Mingdu. However, none of the cultivators in the Ghost City surrendered. Their determination seemed to be stronger than the Wangdu. After all, they were a group of puppets. Fight to the death. Live and die together with the Ghost City. From a certain perspective, they were the ones who truly didn't fear death. The Wangdu cultivators were still watching the battle, because Sumo didn't give them any missions. In reality, they really didn't need anything here. Perhaps they would only be needed when the battlefield was cleaned up at the end. Massacre. It was another massacre. Although there were no real lives in the Ghost City, the sky above the Ghost City was still filled with dust and blood. The cultivator puppets were made of different materials, but they all turned to dust in the end. Sumo and Zhao Xiao didn't make a move. However, as Sumo watched the cultivators of the Ghost City die, she felt a bit emotional. Then, Sumo suddenly turned to ask Zhao Xiao, "Dragon saliva, do you think we are puppets made by the Creator as well? However, we are a bit more advanced, but we don't know it." Zhao Xiao was startled, but he didn't deny this question, because who could say for sure whether they were puppets or not? Chapter 514. 2 hours later, when the smoke dissipated, the ghost capital was in ruins. Sumo and Zhao Xiao stared at the scene without saying a word. Then, under Jean Montan's command, the forgotten capital cultivators began to clean up the battlefield. The ghost capital was full of treasures. This was because it was a giant puppet to begin with. The materials were treasures. At this time, Sumo had put away Tao Yao, the life and death man, and the dragon elephant soul eater's corpse. The little white pig was standing on Sumo's shoulder excitedly, showing off. After all, it had earned some merit this time. Then, Sumo and Zhao Xiao landed inside the ghost capital. However, the entire ghost capital was empty. Broken walls and ruins were everywhere, no longer the same as before. Sumo went straight to the pavilion of living on the street. The pavilion of living wasn't big. The couplet was still there, mimicking all living beings, thousands of faces, only one true soul. Understanding the Tao, one joy, one sorrow, do not forget the karma of the past. However, the pavilion of living was tightly shut. The glory of the past was long gone. "This store is empty," Zhao Xiao said from the side. Sumo nodded. Of course, he had also sensed everything. Then, Sumo waved his hand and cast a spell. It was the same spell he used to restore everything in the Undying Kingdom. Whoosh! A mirror of light appeared in the air. Everything around the pavilion of life and its surroundings were clearly reflected in the light mirror. However, this time, it didn't reflect everything in the past like it did in the Undying Kingdom. The scene was still. Someone erased the memories of the pavilion of living. Zhao Xiao frowned. "Impressive." Sumo nodded and smiled helplessly. "Back then, I obtained the 3 puppet replicas from this store. Their creator is definitely extraordinary. Bu Xingkong is the owner of this store. The disciple of the 3 realms ghost prodigy is definitely a powerhouse. However, it seems like this store has been empty for a long time. Perhaps the owner had foresight and left the ghost capital early," Zhao Xiao said. "This city has been abandoned." Sumo nodded. "Great Elder." At this moment, Jean Mantang came to report, in the entire ghost city, there is not a single true cultivator. As for the damaged puppets, there were 100,000 of them. The rest were innumerable spirit stones, magical treasures, and talismans. But how to deal with it? Grand Elder, please make a decision. It's even easier now that there are no cultivators. Sumo smiled faintly. Move the entire city back to Forgotten City. Then he would turn this ghost city into the outer city of the Forgotten Capital. Spirit stones, magic treasures, and so on will naturally fill up the Forgotten Treasury. Hearing this, Jean Mantang felt somewhat troubled. Grand Elder, We can take the spirit stones and Dharma treasures with us. But how are we going to transport this city back? Oh, hee. It's simple. Sumo didn't think of this just now, but when she heard it, she immediately smiled and patted the little white pig. Hee, you carry this ghost back, then I'll give you the fruits in the cave. Hee. Hearing this, the little white pig's eyes lit up. Of course it knew what the fruits in the cave were. The fruits in the soul storage altar cave were definitely immortal fruits. At this moment, Sumo had already taken out the skeleton of the adult dragon elephant soul devouring beast. At the same time, Sumo began to set up the formation. After all, the current ghost city had already turned into the appearance of a city. Sumo needed to use the formation to gather the entire city into one. Sumo's formation was like a pocket, completely containing the entire ghost city. Roar! The little white pig roared in excitement and then jumped into the skull. With a thought, the dragon elephant soul-devouring beast instantly grew to a height of hundreds of feet, as if it could support the heavens and the earth. Then, the dragon elephant soul-devouring beast stretched out its front claw and directly grabbed a corner of the formation. Roar! The dragon elephant soul-devouring beast roared at the sky, shaking the entire southern region. Following that roar, the entire ghost city actually uprooted from ground. Whoosh! The cultivators of the Forgotten Capital were shocked once again. Actually, it wasn't just the cultivators of the Forgotten Capital. Many cultivators of the chaotic gods of the southern region who were watching the battle were shocked as well. The dragon elephant soul-devouring beast was one of the 3 divine beasts of the Pure Land. However, almost none of them had seen the true power of the dragon elephant soul-devouring beast. Just now, the dragon elephant soul-devouring beast forcefully fought against the ghost city's puppets. However, at this moment, the dragon elephant soul-devouring beast spread its wings, carrying the ghost city on its back, and soared high up in the sky. The sky brightened slightly. Victory! This was a true victory. Sumo and Zhao Xiao were still at the front, followed by Jean Mantang and the other cultivators of the Forgotten Capital. At the very end, the dragon elephant soul-devouring beast carried the entire ghost city. It was as dark as the clouds in the sky. That scene could be said to have shocked the entire chaotic gods' southern region. At this moment, the news of Sumo's consecutive victories and the destruction of 2 cities had already spread to the Forgotten Capital. At that moment, the cultivators of the Forgotten Capital who stayed behind could not believe their ears. In less than a day, 2 of the southern region's 3 capitals were destroyed. From then on, of the 3 capitals of the southern region, only Wangdu remained. The citizens of the Forgotten Capital cried tears of joy. Su Mo had forcefully pulled Wangdu out of the abyss of death, and had even pushed Wangdu to a height that he had never reached before. Many Forgotten Capital cultivators stood at the top of the city. In the distance, they could already see the Forgotten Capital army, led by Sumo and Zhao Xiao. In the void behind them, there was an incomparably huge bone beast carrying a black city on its back. Congratulations on your victory. Elder is mighty. Forgotten Capital is mighty. Elder is mighty. Forgotten Capital is mighty. Their shouts shook the heavens and earth. The entire Forgotten Capital city was celebrating their victory. The haze of death that had hung over them for the past 3 months was swept away. Boom! 30 miles away from the Forgotten Capital city, Little White Pig controlled the dragon elephant soul devouring beast to lower the ghost city. Dust rose for tens of thousands of feet, and the ground shook. This city still needed to be modified before it could be used properly. The Dream City was destroyed, and the Ghost City was moved. The cultivators of the Forgotten Capital had never felt so powerful. Between the heavens and earth, it was a scene of celebration. Sumo and Zhao Xiao were surrounded by tens of thousands of cultivators. There are many things to be done. Zhao Xiao sighed, looking at the smoke that had just dissipated from the top of the Forgotten Capital city. Of course, Sumo nodded and smiled. Restoring our galaxy is a long and arduous task. What we want is not 1 or 2 cities, but the entire hidden city. Zhao Xiao's pupils constricted. If the galaxy was destroyed because of Hidden City, then let Hidden City become the galaxy. Half a month later, everything calmed down. The original Ghost City was completely destroyed by the Forgotten Capital cultivators. Then, the Forgotten Capital cultivators used everything it had to build an outer city 30 miles away from the Forgotten Capital City. Just like that, the entire Forgotten Capital City expanded a lot. The name of Dream Capital was also abolished and ceased to be used. The three capitals merged into one. The original Forgotten Capital City and Dream Capital City formed a kind of mother-child city structure. Later, after the discussion of the elders, the three capitals merged into one and changed its name to Sioux City. The name Sioux naturally came from Sumo. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were added to the elders' council. At the same time, Zhao Xiu joined the council. Of course, Zhao Xiu's position was extraordinary. In the Forgotten Capital Castle, the second floor of the original Qiu, he and Yun Lu belonged to Zhao Xiu. Zhao Xiu also did not participate in the daily management of Sioux City. Jin Manning was elected as the managing elder, responsible for internal and external affairs, just like Zhuge Hong. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. Everything was calm in Sioux City, and everything was on the right track. And Sumo had to enter the soul storage altar cave again. Chapter 5:15. All three became one. Sumo's power gradually took root in the chaotic gods continent. At this time, no one would have thought that 1,000 years later, this power would control the entire chaotic gods continent. The top floor of Forgotten Castle still belonged to Sumo. Actually, Sumo still had many things to do. First, he had to refine a soul-replenishing pill for Zhao Xiu. It was a miraculous medicine left behind in the three realms that could repair Zhao Xiu's leaky body. It was a miracle that the dragon's saliva could reincarnate. After all, his reincarnation had been severed by AMU. Secondly, Sumo had to quickly plant the immortal bathing lotus and the red spider lily. No matter which one it was, they were all extremely important to Sumo. Not to mention Yi Wu Hui. If the 7 siblings of the Prometheus 7 could return, it would be a super combat force for Sumo. Therefore, now that everything in Forgotten City was stable, Sumo announced that he was going into seclusion to refine pills. The soul storage altar was his secret. He didn't tell Zhao Xiu in detail. Of course, Zhao Xiu understood what he should ask and what he shouldn't. Not to mention the other Forgotten City cultivators. Their current goal was to make Forgotten City the #1 city in the southern region. Late at night, Sumo packed everything on the top floor of the castle. He prepared to enter the soul storage altar again. To be safe, he let the little white pig walk in front while he followed behind. Whoosh! The little white pig was very excited. After receiving the order, he leaped and dashed out. Sumo followed closely behind. 49 steps. Sumo knew every step by heart. With each step, the scene in front of Sumo kept changing, but Sumo still couldn't see where each step landed. He didn't dare to stop, so he followed the little white pig closely. 49 steps in an instant. Whoosh! The light faded and he landed. In front of the cave. In front of Sumo was the same as when he left. The ground was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been carefully polished. The original steps and platform were all gone. The black stone slab that once held the green urn was still there. However, it was completely embedded into the ground, like a dark black mark. The 4-line poem written by the red-clothed Mu Jinghong was also there. The large vermilion words glistened brightly. It was the red-clothed Mu Jinghong's persistence and unwillingness. The starry sky above the cave abode did not disappear. The stars were still shining brightly, causing the entire cave to be enchanting. Standing in the middle of the cave, Sumo's heart was in turmoil. The soul storage altar. Senior Sister Mu was still waiting for him to rescue her. 1,000 years later, he would go to Nether City to fight against Tianfu City. In 3,000 years, he would become a venerable. For the first time, Sumo felt that time waited for no man. Time was running out. At this time, the little white pig had already made a beeline for the back hole. Taking a deep breath, Sumo also went straight to the back of the cave. Back cave. The Flower Valley was still the same Flower Valley, and the old house was still the same old house. The changes in the front of the cave did not affect the back cave at all. The flower bed was filled with fragrance, and the many immortal fruits made one salivate. Oomph, oomph. The little white pig lay outside the flower bed, sticking out his little butt. Then he turned back and stared with big watery eyes, drooling at the same time. Sumo smiled. He knew that he had promised the little white pig to eat immortal fruits. Without Sumo's help, the little white pig would not be able to eat these immortal fruits at all. Therefore, Sumo did not say much. With a wave of his hand, he plucked 7 or 8 immortal fruits from one of the immortal trees and brought them to the little white pig. Oomph. The little fellow did a handstand to express his gratitude, and then began to chomp on the fruits. Sumo once again looked around the flower bed, and could not help but lightly nod his head. This was the first time he had returned to the soul storage altar cave abode after he recovered his memories. Now his understanding of the soul storage altar cave abode had naturally increased. There were many immortal trees and flowers in the flower bed, but he still did not recognize half of them. The parts that he did recognize would be priceless treasures in the 3 realms. This is definitely not Wu-Er's cave abode. Sumo thought. Plum Blossom 5 it could not have built such a cave abode. The owner of this cave abode should be at least a supremacy or even higher. Mu Jinghong might just be a passerby. The true owner of this cave abode should be a cultivator called Yizong, but he might not be around anymore. Sumo looked at everything around him, making wild guesses in his mind. However, he could not come to a conclusion. Thus, he stopped thinking about it and walked into the flower bed. Oomph. The little white pig looked at Sumo with sparkling eyes as he ate. He was too envious of Sumo. After all, Sumo could come and go as she pleased without being bound by the restrictions. This cave abode belonged to Sumo. The little fellow felt a little wronged. Wasn't it the one who had brought Sumo here? Why did Sumo run amok here? Sumo ignored the little white pig's wild guesses and chose a relatively dark corner. It was at the very edge of the flower bed, under a protruding black rock. There were almost no other immortal herbs around it. It could be considered a quiet spot. Then, Sumo bent down and reached into the ragged sack. 7 rays of white light gathered in her palm. The white light receded, revealing 7 white seeds. The seeds were no more than 30 centimeters long and shaped like crescent moons. They were the seeds of the red spider lily. Sumo looked at the 7 seeds and smiled. Liu Sui Ing, dining little 4, little 5, little 6, little 7, come back. Sumo's voice trembled slightly. In a sense, the red spider lily was an existence that had always accompanied the Dark Lord. From birth to death, they bloomed at the feet of the Dark Lord. In the past 3 realms, the 7 red spider lily siblings had all died for the Dark Lord. The galaxy is broken. Sumo let out a long sigh. I need you to come back and fight. I said that as long as I'm here, you'll be here. As Sumo spoke, she placed the 7 seeds on the soil under the black rock. The red spider lily was a rare flower that grew in the netherworld. After placing the 7 seeds under the black rock, Sumo pointed at the space between her eyebrows with one hand. Chi! A drop of soul blood jumped out from the space between her eyebrows. Sumo remembered that Mu Jinghong had once told her that soul blood should never be given to others easily. Never leave your life and death in the hands of others. However, today, Sumo understood that only his soul blood could bring the red spider lily back to life. Only the aura of the Dark Lord could bring them back to the mortal world. At the same time, Sumo formed a seal with her hand. Once the seal was formed, the space 3 feet around the black rock instantly darkened. Netherworld art. That was a spell that only the Dark Lord could cast in the 3 realms. At the same time, the drop of soul blood fell into the 7 seeds. There was no netherworld in the soul storage altar, but Sumo wanted to create one in the space 3 feet around him. His soul blood and the spell. The living environment of the red spider lily seeds became a small netherworld. Looking again, the 7 red spider lily seeds sank into the soil, and Sumo's soul blood disappeared with them. A cold wind blew, and soul energy rippled. At this time, if a particle entered that space, it would be the true netherworld. In that moment, Sumo looked at everything and suddenly stilled. One flower, one world, one leaf, one universe. Didn't he just create a small heaven and earth just now? Worlds existed relative to each other. Then, whose universe did the three realms belong to? Whose universe did Izon belong to? Chapter 516. In the corner of the flower bed, there was a small netherworld. The red spider lily grew quietly in that place, regardless of its flowering period. Sumo understood that the blooming of the red spider lily would not happen overnight. However, he could wait. Immediately, Sumo stood in the flower bed and looked around. The immortal, bathing, ancient lotus still needed a place. However, there was not much free space in the entire flower bed. Moreover, the immortal, bathing, ancient lotus should need a pool. It was an aquatic plant. Looking left and right, Sumo did not feel that there was a suitable place. Finally, Sumo left the flower bed. He simply took out a few black stones from his storage bag. Those black stones were all from the Ghost City. Its texture was extremely special, but it was the same as the black stone that Sumo had seen in the Silent Death Valley and the stone that carried the big blue urn in the front cave. In addition to the black stones, Sumo took out some 5-colored divine soil. Then, Sumo used the stone as a dam, glued it with the 5-color divine soil, dug out some immortal soil from the flower bed and laid it in the middle, and finally drew the water from the ancient well to pour it in. In this way, a small pool of 7 feet square was formed. In fact, the most wonderful thing was the water from the ancient well. It contained extremely rich spiritual energy that could be said to be endless, and it would never dry up in the pool. After preparing everything, Sumo threw the seed of the immortal, bathing, ancient lotus into it. The seed fell with a sound, creating layers of ripples. Then, the seed gradually sank to the bottom of the pool. The immortal, bathing, ancient lotus also needed time to grow. However, in an instant, the shadow of a white lotus appeared in the pool. The vines were like jade, white like jade. Occasionally, the wind would come and gently ripple. That should be the appearance of the immortal, bathing, ancient lotus. And the real blossoming of the ancient lotus required nourishment from Sumo's soul energy at every stage of cultivation. However, at present, Sumo did not have it. The next step was for Sumo to break through the undead realm as soon as possible, so that he could complete the cultivation of the mortal realm and possess the mortal soul energy. Once the mortal soul energy was injected, the ancient lotus should be able to break out of the ground. The 2 kinds of strange flowers have been planted. Sumo let out a long sigh. The only thing left to do was to refine the soul-nourishing pill. The pill recipe for the soul-nourishing pill was in Sumo's memory, and all the medicinal ingredients were in Sumo's possession. This was a relatively easy task for Sumo. He entered the stone house in the Valley of Flowers. At the same time, he released Black Feather God Hong. All of this was the same as when he cultivated here in the past. The little white pig and the black-feathered god Hong could move about freely. This was because the spirit chi inside the soul storage altar was extremely dense. Here, the little white pig and the black-feathered deity could cultivate and grow better. Everything in the stone house was the same as before. Sumo took out the soul depository cauldron and placed it on the stone stove. Then he slapped his storage pouch, and all the medicinal ingredients entered. There were 18 of them in total. The soul-nourishing pill was an extremely special pill. Without the flower garden of the soul-storing altar, Sumo would have to spend a lot of effort to gather all the herbs. Now, everything was as easy as pie. When the medicinal ingredients entered the cauldron, white mist immediately rose. Everything was the same as before. Sumo didn't need to do anything at all. The soul-storing altar, the soul depository cauldron, and the ancient temple in Silent Death Valley. Sumo knew that there must be some kind of connection between them, but he couldn't figure it out yet. As the white mist rose, the little white pig smelled it and obediently lay outside the stone house. Without Sumo's order, it didn't dare to absorb the delicious mist. Sumo didn't care about the situation inside the soul depository cauldron. Instead, he stared at the wall of the stone house. He really wanted to see the red figure on the wall. Unfortunately, the white mist almost filled the entire stone house, and the red figure on the wall didn't appear again. AI. Sumo let out a long sigh. The difficulty of meeting was indescribable. Mmph. The white mist is yours. Sumo waved his hand. Mmph. The little white pig didn't quite understand his master's thoughts. When it heard that it could absorb the white mist, it immediately raised its nose. The white mist inside the stone house turned into 2 dragons and was absorbed by it. The little fellow had a full meal. Meanwhile, Sumo sat cross-legged on the stone bed and cultivated. If he wanted to see Senior Sister Mu again, he would have to go to the Dust Sift TriStar. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Ding, 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 ding. The 3 soul replenishing pills spun around inside the soul depository cauldron. The crisp sound was like gold and jade. For the soul depository cauldron, 7 days to complete the pill was a very long time. Sumo opened his eyes and put away the soul depository cauldron and the pills with a wave of his hand. Mfmfong, stay here and guard me. I'm going to Sioux City and we'll be back soon. Little White Pig and Black Feather God Hong both nodded. And so, Sumo went to the front cave and stepped out. This time, there were no accidents. 49 steps later, Sumo appeared in the top floor of Forgotten Capital Castle. Forgotten Capital City used to be a city that never slept, and the current Sioux City was the same. The night was hazy and the lights were bright. Sumo came out of the top floor and stood at the top of the castle. From here, he could almost overlook the entire Sioux City. After more than a month of repair, Sioux City had begun to gradually walk out of the post-war haze. Sumo was dressed in black and looked down on everything. This was his city. However, this city was too small. Whoosh! Another black figure stood behind Sumo on the left. Holy Lord! There was only one person who would call Sumo like this in private, and that was Zhao Xiao. Sumo did not deliberately correct him. This old address might be a reminder. The 3 realms were on Sumo's shoulders. Sumo did not say much and directly handed the 3 soul replenishing pills to Zhao Xiao. 3 soul replenishing pills are enough to make up for your leaky body. Thank you, Holy Lord. Zhao Xiao did not hesitate and directly took the pills. He did not even ask where the pills came from. In Zhao Xiao's subconscious, perhaps he still thought the Dark Lord was omnipotent. Zhao Xiao did not immediately take the pills because he needed to cultivate in seclusion to fully utilize the pill's effects. Dragon saliva, cultivate as hard as you can. Sumo sighed. After you repair your body and soul, the resources in Sioux City will be enough for your cultivation. You can enter the God Burial Realm, or even higher. Yes, Zhao Xiao nodded. If our journey is a sea of stars, then we might only have a small canoe. Sumo looked at the bright lights of Sioux City. One Sioux City is far from enough. This subordinate understands. Zhao Xiao bowed slightly and said solemnly, I will increase my cultivation as fast as possible and strive to unify the chaotic god's mainland. The corner of Sumo's mouth curled. This was dragon saliva. He could always accurately understand the Dark Lord's intentions and carry out his orders with all his might. Ghost City has been destroyed. The corpseless sect will not do nothing, Sumo said. It's just that everything is yet to come. We do not have much time. With that, Sumo turned around. Dragon saliva. I'm going into seclusion for real. I might need 100 years. I hope that by the time I come out, Sioux City will be flourishing. Yes. Before Zhao Xiao could say anything else, Sumo's figure had already disappeared. In the night, Zhao Xiao stood at the top of the castle. His black clothes fluttered in the wind. He looked like a king in the dark. Chapter 517. Under the heavens, above all living beings, at the center of the Pure Land. The Tianfu City floated in the air at a height of 108,000 zhang. It was surrounded by a sea of clouds. In a sense, Tianfu City was the ruler of the Pure Land. It was to the Pure Land like how Zio was to the desolate sea. Inside the city, the 5 color divine palaces stood in the west of Tianfu City. The 5 palaces had an extraordinary aura. Green, white, red, and black palaces were located in the east, west, north, and south. In the center was a golden main hall. The main hall was resplendent and magnificent. Many strange beasts were carved on the stone pillars, and countless gems were embedded on the walls. In the center was a high platform. At this moment, Chi Wu-Hui was wearing a blue dress, sitting on a large black chair on the platform. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and she looked tired and displeased. Below the platform, 3 cultivators knelt on one knee. One wore a golden robe, one a red robe, and one a green robe. The robe was the same as the puppet's purple robe, but the color was different. Jin and Huan and Muan. They were the 3 puppets under Chi Wu-Hui. They seemed to have just finished reporting. Chi Wu-Hui was silent for a long time. None of the 3 puppets dared to stand up. They were all cultivator puppets, and their intelligence was almost no different from cultivators. At this moment, they could all feel the anger radiating from Chi Wu-Hui's body. Jinan, when the ghost city was destroyed, the Pavilion of Life really didn't react. Chi Wu-Hui seemed unwilling. Indeed, Jinan said again. Chi Wu-Hui sneered, and her brows relaxed. Watching the ghost city being destroyed isn't Bu Xian's character. Unless... Yu Wu-Hui paused for a moment. First, miss. The green-robed puppet wanted to say something. Speak, Chi Wu-Hui said. The second prince has always been in control of the second star zone. Apart from the secret realms in the 9 underworlds, he almost never interfered with the other places in the Pure Land. The Ghost City was originally a small city belonging to the second miss. So, you want to say that the real master behind the Pavilion of Life is Bu Xingkong, and not Bu Xingyan? Chi Wu-Hui's pupil shrank. Yes, the puppet replied. The relationship between the first prince and the second miss has always been very good. It's not strange for there to be a living pavilion in the Ghost City. Hee. Chi Wu-Hui nodded, and then he muttered to himself. Eldest senior brother, good sister, there's been no news from Grandmaster all this time. Let's see what you can do. Fire serpent, wood serpent. Yes, sir. The 2 puppets answered in unison. Head to the chaotic gods' southern region immediately. If Sumo is there, bring him back. Niao Wu-Hui said. Understood. Fire centipede and wood puppet answered. Immediately, a teleportation portal appeared beneath the 2 puppets, and they disappeared in an instant. At this moment, Jinan was still kneeling on one knee and didn't dare to move in the slightest. However, his golden robe trembled slightly. Jin, too. Niao Wu-Hui's beautiful eyes narrowed. Your subordinate is here. Jin's tone had already changed. Is the netherworld realm still calm and peaceful? The corner of Niao Wu-Hui's mouth rose into a beautiful arc. Jin and didn't dare to raise his head, but he knew that Niao Wu-Hui had that expression on his face. The netherworld realm is indeed calm and peaceful, the golden puppet said. Hee. Niao Wu-Hui sneered. Jinan, I already told you last time, you belong to the 5-color divine palace. Your subordinate remembers, the golden puppet said. Remember? Niao Wu-Hui shook his head. Do you remember why the information you sent back was so erroneous and even wrong? The small shop in the Ghost City. When I investigated it, it was indeed the second prince's shop. The golden puppet said. The Ghost City is a small matter, Niao Wu-Hui said with a smile. However, Sumo has already gone to the netherworld realm, and she even caused the destruction of a secret realm. The cultivators of the ancient Lotus Star Zone have all gone to the netherworld. The master of the Nether City has also woken up. Don't tell me you don't know about this? Your subordinate has failed in his duty, the golden puppet said hurriedly. Failed in your duty? Hee. Niao Wu-Hui smiled like a flower. If a puppet always fails in his duty, what use do I have you? Eldest young mistress, Jinan called out, but his body had already moved. He didn't move backward, but forward. He was going to self-destruct. But how could Niao Wu-Hui give him a chance? Niao Wu-Hui sat on the big chair. His body didn't even move, but his eyes suddenly opened. 2 rays of purple light shot out from his eyes. They were like 2 bolts of lightning. Boom! The purple light hit Jin and sent him flying. Then, he sprawled on the floor of the hall. Jin had struggled to get up, but it was impossible. A god-burying realm puppet couldn't resist at all in front of Niawuhuwei. Eldest young mistress, the golden puppet yelled. Kim Jong-un, I can give you anything they can give you. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance. Yiwuhuwei said with a smile. At the same time, she waved her hand. Whoosh! The golden robe on Jinan's body was taken back by Niawuhuwei. A middle-aged man was crawling on the floor, almost completely naked. However, his body was five-colored, which wasn't the skin color of a normal person. A puppet. Niawuhuwei's voice became solemn. The most important thing is to obey orders and be loyal to your master. If you betray me, what's the use of making puppets? His words were powerful and resonant, like a divine oracle. God won't let you do this. You betray God. Five-colored blood flowed from the corner of Jean Anne's mouth. However, he glared at Niawuhuwei, unwilling to accept this. But his gaze was gradually losing its strength. God, Niawuhuwei looked at the golden puppet and said, I don't know where God has gone. He might never be able to return. Boom! Niawuhuwei's beautiful eyes turned cold, and she grabbed at the air with one hand. Following Niawuhuwei's gesture, Jean Anne's body exploded. Five-colored smoke rose throughout the hall. The god-burying realm puppet died in an instant. There was no anger on Niawuhuwei's face. She still wore a bright smile. It was just a puppet. In her mind, it was a toy that could be discarded at any time. Then, she made a turn in the air with one hand. The five-colored smoke gradually gathered into a circle in the hall, then compressed bit by bit. Finally, it gathered into a five-color ball about 3 inches in diameter and fell into Niawuhuwei's palm. Niawuhuwei's palm was as fair as jade. The five-colored ball shone brilliantly in her palm. It was a puppet, or rather a life. At the very least, it used to be. Life was both lofty and insignificant. Niawuhuwei's pupils constricted slightly. At that moment, no one knew what she was thinking. However, if she wanted to, she could refine another god-burying realm puppet. After a moment of concentration, Niawuhuwei put away the five-colored ball. Then, she tapped the armrest of the large black chair. In an instant, the graceful figure of a woman appeared next to her. It was none other than the maidservant Sumo had met in the Repentance Garden in Tianfu City, Xiaoyu. She was Niawuhuwei's personal maidservant. She looked to be about 14 or 15 years old, and looked harmless. First miss. Xiaoyu bowed. Go to the southern region of the chaotic gods continent. I've already sent the fire puppets. If I'm not mistaken, they will definitely be stopped. Your task is to pass on my order to let Sumo go and keep Sioux City alive. We have to give face to First Senior Brother. Don't worry, First Miss. You understands. Xiaoyu nodded. She turned around and disappeared. Niawuhuwei sat in the hall and muttered to herself, Sumo, perhaps you've forgotten. But you can't drink this soul-cleansing soup for nothing. Then, she seemed to be tired. She sighed softly and slowly closed her eyes. The entire hall was once again empty. Who could understand Niawuhuwei's loneliness? Chapter 518. The Chaotic Gods Continent. The air of the southern region rippled. Huo Wu and Mu Wu, one red and one green, stepped out of the formation. They were both Divine Burial Realm cultivator puppets, late-stage Divine Burial Realm at that. 2 late-stage Divine Burial Realm cultivator puppets were far more powerful than the puppets of Ghost City. On the Chaotic Gods continent, they were comparable to gods. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that Niawuhuwei had only sent them to bring back Sumo. Both Wu and Mu Wu were capable of destroying an entire region on their own. The 2 puppets did not speak along the way. Their target was Sioux City. The 2 Divine Burial Realm cultivators traveled 1,000 kilometers in an instant. In mere moments, they were within 150 kilometers of the city. For Divine Burial Realm cultivators, this was an effective distance for their attacks. In the air, the 2 puppets could see the rough outline of Sioux City, the inner city and the outer city. The outer city was as black as ink. The inner city was ashen white. The entire city was neat and tidy. It had been almost 2 months since the War of the Three Capitals. The haze over Sioux City had almost completely dispersed. The city was in good shape and full of vitality. Sioux City, Huowu saw the words on the city wall and spoke first, his tone questioning. Sioux City, the city of sumo, the city of revival. Muwu nodded. That is a good name. Unfortunately, the first mist will not revive this city. Huowu nodded as well. They understood that bringing back sumo would mean the destruction of Sioux City. Let's go, Huowu said. Yes, Muwu replied. The two puppets wanted to fly above Sioux City. In fact, as far as they were concerned, Chi Wu Hui had given them an extremely ordinary order. Sumo was merely an undying cultivator. In their eyes, Sumo's puppet was no obstacle at all. Bringing back Sumo was a mission they could complete. In fact, it was a simple matter. The two puppets moved, wanting to continue forward. However, they suddenly discovered that they were trapped in the air. The two puppets exclaimed in surprise. They never expected to encounter something that could imprison them in the southern region of the chaotic gods continent. Both puppets were wearing hoods, but they still looked at each other. Who is it? Musu couldn't help but shout. He and Huowu were above the clouds, looking around at the vast sea of clouds. Where is there anyone? However, they were truly trapped here, unable to move an inch. It was an extremely strange power. An array formation. Huowu reacted and said, Someone set up a shocking array in the void 150 kilometers outside of Sioux City. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. A formation 300 li away? Hearing Huowu's words, Musu was shocked. Who could have such an ability? When he looked again, Huowu took out a magic treasure from his bosom. It was a magic treasure that looked like a compass. Huomeng held in his hand. The needle on the compass kept moving left and right. That meant that there was an abnormally powerful force in the surrounding area, and it was evenly distributed. At the same time, Mu Xiao took out 8 spirit talismans from her storage pouch. The 8 spirit spells were all break world-class spells. Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi. The wooden puppet raised its hand, and 8 spirit talismans flew out in the direction of the 8 trigrams. The spirit talismans lit up, emitting different colored lights. They were like 8 colorful dragons, each flying into the void. Boom! Ka! Boom! Suddenly, thunder exploded in the void, and the surrounding sea of clouds kept churning. Huowu and Mu Su's surroundings lit up with countless lights. Looking again, the void was as dense as a net, and the colorful lines formed layers of a great array. The great array had appeared. However, the compass in Huowu's hand was still shaking. Whoosh! A vermilion flame came out of Huowu's mouth. At this time, Huowu's hood had been taken off. He was an extremely handsome young male cultivator, but his face was slightly red. The flame was like a knife. Huowu's flame was not an ordinary flame. It could even melt a god burying treasure. At this time, Huowu hoped that his flame could break through the colorful lines. Chi-Chi. In the void, there was a Chi-Chi sound. However, the flame was useless. Musu's hand shook, and she threw out a few more flying blades. Ding-dong, ding-dong. When the flying blades came into contact with the colorful lines, it was as if they had hit an iron plate, unable to break through. Huowu and Musu tried 4 or 5 different methods, but to no avail. At this time, they didn't even know what this great array was or who had set it up. However, the person who could set up such a great array was not ordinary. The two puppets were in despair. From the current situation, it was very likely that they would be trapped in the array. And at this moment, the colorful lines in front of them actually automatically separated. Not far away, a cultivator in a gray robe was slowly stepping on the clouds. The gray robe style was very special. Although it was also wearing a hood, the sleeves and hem of the robe were embroidered with auspicious clouds. The gray robe fluttered like a cloud following. Moreover, the gray robe actually had dark patterns on it. The pattern of the dark patterns was the vast starry sky. However, if one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to see it. The gray-robed cultivator was thin, a bit tall, and slender. He came against Huowu and Musu. At this moment, Huo Wu and Mu Su felt suffocated. Although they couldn't see the man's face clearly, they could sense who he was, or rather, whose incarnation it was. In the entire corpseless sect, there was only one person who wore such a gray robe, Bu Shinkong. First Prince, Huo Wu and Mu Su didn't expect this. They would meet Bu Shinkong here. Whether it was the real body or a clone, it meant the same thing to them. They really wanted to kneel down. However, the pressure of the array didn't give them the chance to kneel. The two puppets stood stiffly in the air. At this moment, they really were puppets. Huo Wu, Mu Su. Bu Shinkong's voice was low and faint. It was an indescribable and inexplicable tone. The gray robe Bu Shinkong was a real existence, right in front of them, but also an illusion that could disappear at any time. Yes, Huo Wu and Mu Su could only respond. You can't break my array, can you? The gray hood covered Bu Shinkong's face, but there seemed to be a hint of a smile in his voice. We wouldn't dare. The two puppets felt the aura of death. Normally, they were most afraid of Niao Wuhui's smile, because if Niao Wuhui smiled, he was most likely going to kill. Therefore, Bu Shinkong's smile also scared them. Haha, it's fine. I'm different from Wuhui, Bu Shinkong said. However, his words were a bit confusing. Who was Wuhui referring to? Yi Wuhui or Niao Wuhui? Unfortunately, Huo Wu and Mu Su didn't dare to ask. First young mistress sent you here? Bu Shinkong asked again. First young mistress was referring to Niao Wuhui. Yes. What order? Bring back Sumo. Oh. Bu Shinkong nodded lightly. I set up an inescapable net within 300 miles of Sioux City. Go back and tell first young mistress that Sioux City will be my territory from now on. You can't break this array. If you really want Sumo, she has to come here herself. Otherwise, no one from the corpseless sect will be able to enter. Huh? The two puppets were startled. They didn't understand why Bu Shinkong wanted to protect Sumo. Turn back if you don't want to die. As soon as Bu Shinkong finished speaking, a heavenly path appeared behind Huo Wu and Mu Su. They could leave as soon as they turned around. However, they were hesitating, because they didn't dare to disobey Niao Wuhui's order. However, they didn't dare to offend Bu Shinkong either. While they were hesitating, Bu Shinkong had already raised his right hand. Chapter 519. All life was equal, but gods were not included. To Huo Mu's puppet, Bu Shinkong was like a god to all living beings. A late-stage deity burying realm puppet was something that Bu Shinkong could easily destroy with a wave of his hand. Therefore, the moment Bu Shinkong raised his right hand, it meant that Huo Mu and Huo Wu would be destroyed in an instant. Huo Wu's expression changed. Mu Wu's hood fell off. Cultivation puppets had the same intelligence as real cultivators. At that moment, they were filled with fear, because they all smelled the scent of death, but they cannot escape from it. Bu Shinkong was more decisive than Shi Wuhui. Not turning back meant death. That was the last thing Bu Shinkong wanted to say. He did not want to waste any more time on the two puppets. However, at this critical moment, a voice came from the void. First Prince, have mercy. Along with that voice, a petite figure gradually appeared. It was none other than Xiao Yu, the maidservant who had followed Huo Wu and Mu Wu. First Prince, please calm down. Xiao Yu quickly bowed. Oh, Bu Shinkong lowered his hand. He knew Xiao Yu, because Chi Wuhui only had 2 maidservants. Did my junior sister send you? Bu Shinkong asked calmly. First Prince, this maidservant is here on First Lady's orders. Xiao Yu's expression was solemn, her tone respectful. First Lady asked me to greet you. Oh, ha! Bu Shinkong chuckled. However, the chuckle had a deeper meaning. Of course, he knew what kind of person Shi Wuhui was. Sioux City is already my territory. Your First Lady controls the entire 3rd sector of East E. Sioux City and a radius of 300 miles is nothing to her, right? If the people of the corpseless sect want to enter, then she should come personally. I welcome her. Chi Wuhui's tone was calm, but Xiao Yu understood what he meant. How can our First Lady be stingy when First Prince wants a place? Forget 300 miles around Sioux City. She can give you the entire chaotic god's mainland with both hands if First Prince likes it. Xiao Yu smiled. Huh. Bushing Kong laughed brightly. Xiao Yu, that last sentence was not from your first lady, was it? How could she give up her chaos god's continent? In short, as long as the First Prince is happy, everything is negotiable. Xiao Yu smiled and did not continue Bushing Kong's words. Bushing Kong stopped laughing, nodded and said, I don't have any other requests. He could only hope that Sioux City would not be disturbed for 1,000 years. No one is allowed to act recklessly. Otherwise, Bushing Kong did not continue, but the threat in his words was obvious. Rest assured, First Prince. Xiao Yu smiled and nodded. Huo Wu and Mu Su didn't know the details and offended the First Prince. Please forgive us. In the future, without the eldest prince's invitation, we absolutely won't take half a step into Sioux City. Very good. Bushing Kong nodded and turned around without saying anything else. As he turned around, the layers of arrays in the void instantly melted like snow. Farewell, First Prince. Xiao Yu hurriedly bowed to send him off. Huo Wu and Mu Nai bowed at the same time. The aura of death around them had already dissipated. Bushing Kong slowly walked forward, but his voice rang out again. Tell Junior's sister that I, Bushing Kong, will remember this favor. In the future, I will repay her. Thank you, First Prince. Xiao Yu's lips curled into a smile. She knew that this was what the First Miss wanted to hear. Bushing Kong's promise carried a lot of weight. Let's go. Xiao Yu watched Bushing Kong's silhouette disappear, then lightly waved her hand. Huo Wu and Mu Su laughed at themselves. They were almost cannon fodder. If Xiao Yu was one step late, their deaths would have been in vain. The First Miss would still do Bushing Kong a favor. The fate of puppets was perhaps always very tragic. However, they didn't dare to say anything. Otherwise, they would be the second Jin In. Now, they had all guessed Jin In's fate. When they looked again, the three of them formed an array under their feet and instantly disappeared into the void. 300 miles away, Sioux City was peaceful. None of the Sioux City cultivators, including Sumo and Long Ji, knew that someone had blocked a disaster for them. If not for Bushing Kong, Huo Wu and Mu Su were enough to turn Sioux City into a river of blood. In the sky above Sioux City, above the clouds, Bushing Kong stood with his hands behind his back. His gray robe fluttered in the wind. There were clouds under Bushing Kong's feet, on his robe sleeves, and in Bushing Kong's heart. His heart was like an unceasing rolling cloud. Dark Supreme, I can protect you for 1,000 years. After 1,000 years, it will depend on your luck. Saying so, Bushing Kong stood there for a long time. Then, he let out a long sigh and walked into the depths of the cloud layer until he completely disappeared. He came softly and left softly. Everything about Bushing Kong was hidden in his gray robe. No one could see him. In this world, no one seemed to know that he had been here. He was very mysterious. Even in the corpseless sect, he was a special existence. Time flew like an arrow. The sun and moon flew like a shuttle. Cultivation was originally a struggle for endless years. Every cultivator's increase in realm was actually a gnawing at time. Soul storage altar cave. Sumo was waking up from a long cultivation session. His black robe was still the same, and his appearance was still the same. However, the moment he opened his eyes, a dark light flashed in his eyes. Oomph. The little white pig next to him seemed to be fatter. Its eyes were slightly red. It wasn't a kind of anger, but a kind of growth. An adult Dracophant soul devouring beasts' eyes were blood red. Clang. Not far away, Black Feather God Hong also let out a neigh. His feathers were mixed with a few long red feathers. His long red beak was also a bit longer, and it was even redder. Black Feather God Hong was also evolving. Now, he also had the power of divine burial. Because 100 years had passed, whoosh, after Sumo opened his eyes, he let out a breath of turbid air. Divine burial. In 100 years, Sumo had gone from undying middle stage to late stage, great circle, and advanced to divine burial. This speed was almost unimaginable. However, to Sumo, there was no surprise. He even felt that it was a bit slow. After all, after recovering his memories, Sumo almost didn't have any bottlenecks in cultivation. His soul had long reached Great Circle. Divine Burial was the first realm of the immortal stage. At this time, the cyan skeleton on the Nine Dragons immortal platform in Sumo's Pill C had almost completely turned into a human form. On the immortal platform, there was actually another Sumo sitting cross-legged. At the same time, in his Pill C, there was already immortal soul chi. Because of this, Sumo woke up from his cultivation. Standing up, Sumo walked directly to the pond where the lotus was growing, and then with a thought, he stretched out his index and middle fingers of his right hand at the same time. Chi, the mortal soul chi shot out from his fingertips, broke through the pond water, and poured into the immortal bath lotus seed. Chapter 520. The mortal soul chi was extraordinary. In fact, it was the accumulation of a cultivator's life in the Izong world. Living beings could only be immortal after experiencing the mortal world. Being stained by the mortal world and experiencing the pain of life and death. Only by washing away the mortal world could one return to one's true self. The mortal world was the path of cultivation. Sumo's mortal soul, chi, turned into a pool of red soil as soon as it entered the pool. In the red soil, the seed of the ancient lotus sprouted at a speed visible to the naked eye. The immortal bathing lotus had truly taken root and sprouted. Sumo looked at the spot of green and smiled. At the same time, he looked up at the flower of the other shore in the corner. Unfortunately, the small netherworld was still chaotic, and there was no sign of the flower of the other shore growing. Of course, Sumo wasn't in a hurry. If it could sprout in 100 years, it wouldn't be the flower of the other shore. One had to know that many cultivators might not even see the flower of the other shore, even after several lifetimes. Divine Burial. Sumo twirled one of his hands in front of him, and a vortex of divine burial appeared in his palm. It was a faint spiritual energy that glowed with black light. The spiritual energy in the Izong world was somewhat different from the three realms. If it was in the three realms, Sumo's realm would be called the mystic immortal realm. In the past, this realm wasn't even worth mentioning in Sumo's eyes. However, after reincarnation, everything had to be redone. Now, Sumo was a divine burial cultivator. In fact, the cultivation techniques in Sumo's memory were as vast as the ocean, and there were countless secret techniques. However, after he reached divine burial, he still chose the mortal Siv Sutra first. Last time, when he was in the soul storage altar, those sutras flew into his sea of consciousness. However, due to the limitations of his realm, he still couldn't practice the cultivation techniques inside. The first half of the Mortal Siv Sutra was a soul cultivation technique, while the second half contained many strange techniques. The former unwithering bone technique had already completed its mission. When Sumo entered the divine burial realm, he automatically cultivated the highest realm of the unwithering technique, unwithering soul. In fact, this was mainly because Sumo was a reincarnator. Otherwise, he would need to cultivate for many more years. To Sumo, some of the techniques in the Siv Sutra were new and novel, but there were also some techniques that she had learned in the three realms. Especially all of Xiao Luo's cultivation techniques. They were all recorded. This is the cultivation technique compiled by Senior Sister Mu. Sumo sighed softly in her heart. The Siv Sutra can be considered as a combination of the three realms and the first depository. Therefore, Sumo didn't think too much about it. God burying. This realm was not considered high for Sumo. Becoming a venerable in 3,000 years was only a small step. Therefore, after organizing the technique, Sumo closed her eyes again. He wanted to continue cultivating and continue to improve. The little white pig in the Flower Valley snorted a couple of times without concealing it, because after Sumo woke up, she didn't even think of picking fruits for it to eat. It had waited for 100 years, but its master seemed to have neglected it. The little white pig lay down unhappily at Sumo's feet. Fortunately, it was sleeping soundly. You cultivate, I'll sleep. Let's see who can last longer. In an instant, the little fellow snored loudly, its white belly rising and falling orderly. In the distance, the black feather deity Hong was not as bored as the little white pig. It was a divine beast that could fight against loneliness. The black feather deity Hong only let out a low cry and then moved freely in the flower valley. Its goal was to cultivate to a red state. One man and two beasts. The soul storage altar cave abode could be said to be deserted, but it was not deserted, but it was somewhat deserted. But most of the time, this was the state of a cultivator. Only by enduring loneliness could one achieve great things. Flowers still bloomed. Trees still grew. Time passed by slowly in the seemingly boring but necessary days. Suemo sat there cross-legged, unmoving. His black robe was constantly flowing with light. That was the endless spiritual power. The spirit energy in the soul storage altar was constantly being absorbed by Sumo. His front, back, left, and right were all covered with related formations. So his surroundings would automatically be filled with supreme-grade spirit stones that he needed. Back then, Sumo had prepared a large number of supreme-grade spirit stones for himself, because he really did have a mind. Of course, at Sumo's level, even supreme-grade spirit stones were only a small help, but it was better than nothing. Since Sumo had such conditions, of course he would use them. Raising his cultivation was Sumo's current goal. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years passed. In this time, Sumo did not rest, nor did he open his eyes. Middle stage of the god burial realm. Sumo slowly opened his eyes, but he only looked around indifferently. The immortal, bathing, ancient lotus was growing bit by bit. 2 green leaves were already floating on the pond. The resurrection lily under the black cliff was as still as before. But the little netherworld was even more like the netherworld. Dark, dark, and eerie. Maybe the resurrection lily was about to sprout. Sumo had wanted to pick some immortal fruits for the little white pig. However, he discovered that the little fellow was snoring loudly at his feet. So Sumo did not wake it. Instead, he picked many immortal fruits and landed next to Black Feather God Pig. God Pig, cultivate well. Sumo did not say anything and closed his eyes again. On the other hand, Heyuhong looked at the little white pig with some schadenfreude. Then, he lowered his head and ate the immortal fruits one by one. But the little white pig did not know. The red feathers on Black Feather God Pig's body increased. He continued to cultivate. Inside the soul storage altar, days passed. In reality, whether it was Sumo, the little white pig, or Black Feather God Pig, their concept of time was very vague. Most of them counted time based on their own condition. Another 100 years passed in a flash. In other words, Sumo had cultivated in the soul storage altar for 300 years. In this life, this was the longest time Sumo had cultivated in peace since he started cultivating. His cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. For Sumo, bottlenecks did not exist. Middle stage, burying God realm. Late stage, burying God realm. Great circle, burying God. On this day, the black light on Sumo's body was even brighter. Black Feather God Pig was the first to notice this. By now, he was very used to the burial god presence that his master gave off. But today's presence was completely different. The black light on Sumo's body was gathering bit by bit. It was like mist, like clouds, and it started to roil. The black energy was like a sea. The entire soul storage altar cave seemed to have changed slightly. Oomph. The little white pig was startled awake and looked around with sleepy eyes. This fellow really had slept for 200 years. The great dragon-elephant soul-devouring beast had displayed the characteristics of a pig to the fullest. Zzz. The surrounding airflow actually became somewhat sharp. Sumo's body was like a boulder. But all of this indicated a change in him. The little white pig and Black Feather God Pig understood. Their master was going to cross realms again. Boom! Crack! Several claps of thunder sounded around Sumo. The black spirit mist suddenly exploded. But no heavenly tribulation descended. This was the advantage of being a reincarnator of the 3 realms. The little white pig didn't pay attention and was directly struck by the sword. In an instant, the white pig became black. Boom! Rumble. This sound came from Sumo's dance sea. Looking again, all the black mist in the Immortals' cave instantly rushed into Sumo's dance sea. The rolling thunder lasted for a long time. A while later, Sumo's aura changed qualitatively. Finally, he opened his eyes. Sumo's gaze changed again, because he had crossed realms. Chapter 521. 300 Years. From the undead realm to the breaking realm. Sumo's cultivation speed, whether it was in the three realms or Izong, was absolutely shocking. The breaking realm was the highest level of existence in the Pure Land world. This was because the higher-level cultivators in the Pure Land world did not belong to the Pure Land world. They were all passers-by. The Pure Land was just a relay station. Sumo opened his eyes. This time, he slowly stood up. After all, it had been another 100 years. Sumo looked at the ancient lotus again. There was not much change. The Black Cliff's red spider lily still did not move. Humph! The little white pig hurried over to congratulate him. Congratulations to Master for leveling up to the Breaking Realm Great Path. Should I reward the little white pig with a few fruits? The little white pig's eyes were pitiful. All the words in his heart were written in his eyes. Hee. Sumo smiled and did not say much. He waved his hand and plucked a lot of fruits. He gave them to the little white pig and the black feather deity. The little white pig was very excited. After all, he had fruits to eat when he woke up. It was one of life's greatest joys. However, he felt that the black feather deity was very calm. He was calm as if he had already eaten. At this time, the little white pig could not help but look at the fruits in the flower garden. Unfortunately, he had slept for 200 years. He was a little confused about whether there were new fruits or not. However, his instincts told him that he might be at a disadvantage. Humph! That big bird was eating too elegantly. The little white pig cursed in his heart. However, Sumo was right in front of him. He did not dare snatch it. The most important thing was that he might not be able to snatch the fruits from that big bird. The little fellow's eyes darted around. In the end, he gave up. Sumo saw this and thought it was a little funny. However, these were all small things. It was a little fun in the boring cultivation life. Then, Sumo slowly walked out of the flower valley and went straight to the front cave. The little white pig was more alert. He hurriedly followed while eating. If Master left the cave, he had to follow. Blackwing God Hong, on the other hand, was not summoned. He was still pacing back and forth gracefully in the cave. Two great divine beasts, two different personalities. In front of the cave, the starlight was as bright as ever. The star map on the ceiling didn't change at all. Sumo looked up again. The 49 stars were still the most dazzling. One step at a time. Sumo didn't know when she would be able to reach that level. However, break world powers were not enough. He still had a long way to go. Chun Luo, 3 stars. Needless to say, Sumo knew that she currently did not have the ability to save Mu Jinghong. He hadn't completely mastered the mortal sifting scripture either. He needed more time. However, it had been 300 years. He wanted to go back to Sioux City to take a look. Therefore, Sumo's figure moved slightly, and she had already taken a step forward. The break world-class Sumo was much better than before. However, the little white pig kept staring at Sumo. Just as Sumo's figure moved, the little fellow followed closely behind. Oomph! Stupid bird, you can't get out. Who told you to eat too many of my fruits? The little white pig felt very proud. Indeed, it could freely enter and exit the Soul Altar Cave. Black Feather God Hong didn't have that power. The little white pig followed, and Sumo didn't refuse. One person and one beast left the Soul Altar and went to Sioux City. 300 years could be considered long, but it could also be considered short. For mortals, 300 years could mean a few reincarnations. For cultivators, 300 years could pass in the blink of an eye. However, in those 300 years, Sioux City had undergone earth-shattering changes. Back then, the battle to destroy Dream Capital and Ghost Capital had established Sioux City's position in the Chaotic Gods southern region. On the Chaotic Gods continent, there weren't many large sections. Many sects occupied a corner of the continent. For tens of thousands of years, there hadn't been a ruling power in the entire southern region. Inside Sioux City, there were two undying cultivators in charge. For the chaotic gods' southern region, this was no secret. Back then, during the battle to destroy Dream Capital, there were god-burying puppets. So, no one dared to provoke Sioux City in the chaotic gods' southern region. The corpseless sect hadn't appeared either. It could be said that Sioux City had been peaceful for 300 years and had been constantly developing. Now, the inner city and outer city were both magnificent and bustling. More importantly, the overall cultivation of Sioux City's cultivators had improved qualitatively. The elders who hadn't died in battle back then, Jean Mantang, Kong Fongzi, and Huoling Jun, were all deity tribulation cultivators. Lu Ru, the highest, was at the mid-stage deity tribulation realm. Do Tianlu and Fu Wanqing were at the late-stage soul transformation realm. Zhao Xiao had always been cultivating in Sioux City. For 300 years, he rarely showed himself. However, Sioux City knew that one of their elders had always been cultivating in seclusion. 200 years ago, Zhao Xiao had patrolled the city. That day, the entire southern region was shaken, because Zhao Xiao had ascended to the god-burying realm. A god-burying elder was an existence that the people of Forgotten Capital didn't even dare to think about. Everyone knew what it meant to have a god-burying elder. Thus, in the last 100 years, sects in small cities had started to attach themselves to Sioux City. It was good to enjoy the shade under a big tree, and this trend was becoming more and more obvious. The god-burying realm was in chaos. It was a group of dragons without a leader, and no one could completely suppress the other. However, the current Sioux City of the southern region could. Thus, the current Sioux City was the #1 city and the #1 power in the southern region. Vaguely, Sioux City was on the verge of unifying the southern region. Unifying the southern region. In fact, Zhao Xiao had already conveyed this to Jean Mantang and the others. However, Sioux City still needed to prepare for a breakthrough. After all, they didn't have many top-notch forces. The god-burying continent was their small goal, followed by the entire Pure Land. On this day, two cultivators slowly walked over 700 li from Sioux City. One man and one woman. They were all wearing simple and unadorned cyan robes and appeared to be in their 20s. The man was handsome, and the woman was beautiful. Their temperament was very special. At this moment, if one paid attention, they would notice that the cuffs of their blue robes were embroidered with the character Shu. Light faintly flowed on it. 700 li away, they were walking slowly. They didn't ride the wind. From the looks of it, they were on a sightseeing tour. However, the scenery of the southern region of the god-burying realm was indeed lackluster from an aesthetic point of view. Senior brother, Dream Capital is really not bad. The female cultivator smiled. It's not Dream Capital anymore. It's called Dragon City now, and it's a subordinate city of Sioux City. Why do you always like to call it by its old name? The male cultivator smiled. Dragon City's name is too tacky. The female cultivator pouted. It's just a name. The male cultivator said, Dream Capital has already been destroyed. Of course, we can't use that name anymore. Sioux City and Dragon City are the future of the god-burying realm. The male cultivator looked in the direction of Sioux City. Senior brother, will we see sumo this time? The female cultivator asked. Of course. The male cultivator smiled. If we don't see sumo, why would we come to the god-burying realm? Chapter 522. P1. Sioux City, Outer City. www.com. The ghost capital was dismantled into Sioux City's outer city. Other than sumo and dragon saliva, no one else knew how to turn it into a god-burying puppet. Of course, it was just a city during peacetime. The people living in the outer city were all citizens of Sioux City. On the 9th day of every month, the Elder Council would arrange for elders to patrol the city. Currently, there were 7 elders in the Elder Council in Sioux City. Other than Sumo and Zhao Xiao, who barely participated in management, there were 7 other elders. They were Jean Mantang, Lu Ru, Kong Fongzi, Do Tianlu, Fu Wanqing, Guizixing, and Fan Yinzhang. Among them, Jin Mandang was an executive elder, while Lu Ru and Kong Fangzi were former elders. The remaining four were relatively inexperienced. Dou Tianlu and Fu Wanqing used to be Jin Montang's subordinates. Guo Zixing and Fan Yunzhang were the sons and clansmen of Guo Longyi and Fan Yunzhang who died defending the city. The newly promoted elders had more responsibilities. Therefore, the daily patrolling fell on the shoulders of Dou Tianlu, Fu Wanqing, Guo Zixing, and Fan Yunzhang. On this day, Fu Wanqing patrolled the city. When Sumo first came to Wangdu City, the first people she met were Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu. They used to be in charge of Wangdu City's largest inn and gambling den. Now that Fu Wanqing was an elder of Su City, he was no longer in charge of the inn. The routine patrolling was done from the inside to the outside. www.com. Since there was nothing to do in the inner city, Fu Wanqing brought his 4 perfected nascent soul cultivators to the outer city. It was only 30 miles, they could easily cover it. In fact, this kind of patrolling was mostly harmless. However, as soon as he arrived at the outer city, Fu Wanqing sensed 2 extremely special auras. Fu Wanqing's heart skipped a beat, then he spread out his divine sense. In an instant, he locked on 2 cultivators in the center of the outer city. A man and a woman, both wearing simple blue robes. The man was handsome, while the woman was beautiful and gentle. Their temperament was very special. They were definitely not from Su City, because Fu Wanqing knew almost all the people in Su City. However, this was not the most important point. Usually, there were countless cultivators coming and going from Su City. Most importantly, Fu Wanqing actually couldn't see through the 2 cultivators' realms. Mortals or gods? In fact, Fu Wanqing did not hesitate at all. There were also mortals in Su City. However, those 2 were definitely not ordinary people. Their temperament was undoubtedly that of a cultivator. Currently, Fu Wanqing was at the late-stage soul transformation realm. In that case, a cultivator that he could not see through should at least be a graveyard deity. 2 gods of burial, how could this not attract Fu Wanqing's attention? Even though there were burial god cultivators above chaotic god, they were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Fu Wanqing wasn't sure if Su City had any god burial realm cultivators. However, even god burying realm cultivators would purposely suppress their cultivation to avoid unnecessary trouble. Just like Sumo, who had already passed the god tribulation when he first entered Wangdu, he wanted to become a nascent soul intermediate stage himself. Sometimes, exposing one's strength was not a wise choice. However, the man and woman did not suppress their cultivation at all. In fact, they knew that the powerhouses of Su City would soon find out about their differences. However, they did not care about being found out. At this time, Fu Wanqing waved his hand at his 4 nascent soul subordinates. The 4 of you, go and patrol the 4 directions. I will deal with those 2 foreign friends. Yes, the 4 peak nascent soul cultivators replied and went in different directions. Fu Wanqing landed directly inside the city. At this time, the man and woman were standing on an empty ground, looking around casually. They seemed to be waiting for someone to show up. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Fu Wanqing cupped his hands. Oh, the male cultivator's expression was calm. Then he looked Fu Wanqing up and down. May I ask who you are? I am Su City's elder Fu Wanqing. Fu Wanqing said. Ah, so it's Elder Fu. Nice to meet you. The male cultivator cupped his hands at Fu Wanqing. Fellow Taoists, you look unfamiliar. I wonder where you've come from, and what business do you have in Su City? If you need help, I'm willing to help. Fu Wanqing did not point out that the other party was a god burial realm cultivator, because he did not know the other party's background. It would be bad to ask too many questions. Fu Wanqing had to be careful with his words when dealing with 2 god burial realm cultivators who were so high profile. Although Elder Zhao was also a god burial realm cultivator, Fu Wanqing would not provoke them for no good reason. We're looking for Sumo. The male cultivator didn't say anything, but the female cultivator beside him was direct. Elder Su? Fu Wanqing's expression changed slightly. He really hadn't expected such an answer. This was the first time in 300 years that someone had come looking for Sumo, and they were looking for her with such great fanfare, without the slightest misgivings. Fellow Taoists, please tell me your names and sect. I can send them over immediately. Fu Wanqing had actually asked them where they were from, but they did not answer. We're from the ancient Shu continent. The male cultivator smiled. Ancient Shu? Fu Wanqing was taken aback. At the center of the Pure Land was the Sea of Bitterness. Above the sea was Tianfu City, and below the sea was Juyo City. Surrounding the Pure Land were 3 continents: White Bone, Chaotic God, and Pure Land. They formed a ring, but did not border each other. In terms of strength, the White Bone continent was the weakest. After all, its natives were all soulless. The Chaotic God continent was in the middle, but the Chaotic God sect was small and scattered. The strongest of them all was the ancient Shu continent. It was known as the Immortal Continent and was dominated by cultivator clans. The ancient Shu continent was under the rule of the ancient Shu Xianming. There were even rumors that the ancient Shu Xianming had cultivators who could contend with Tianfu and Jiuyo. The 2 cultivators in front of him were actually from the ancient Shu continent. Of course, this surprised Fu Wanqing. The dragon clan of the ancient Shu continent, the male cultivator said, I am Long Yu. My junior sister is Long Ge. We are Xianming's emissaries. With that, Long Yu raised his hand, and a medallion appeared out of thin air. To be more precise, it was a kind of proof of identity. However, it was an illusory image, not a physical object. The image first displayed a map of the ancient Shu continent, then vanished in a flash, transforming into the word Xianming. Finally, the word dragon appeared. The ancient Shu continent, Xianming continent, and the dragon clan. In truth, the identity medallion didn't mean much to Fu Wanqing. He didn't recognize the ancient Shu Xianming medallion at all. Fellow Taoists, please come with me to the inner city to meet the managing elders of Su City. Although Fu Wanqing didn't recognize the medallion, he still courteously invited them. If cultivators like them wanted to harm Su City, it didn't matter where they went. Thank you, Elder Fu, Long Yu said. Please. Fu Wanqing didn't say anything else and took to the air. Long Yu and Long Ge didn't stand on ceremony and followed. Fu Wanqing had already reported the situation to the Council of Elders in Su City. Cultivators of the ancient Shu continent? What are the 2 gods of burial doing in Su City? On the 2nd floor of the Council of Elders Tower, Zhao Xiu couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. If you want to talk about one hidden samsara with more like-minded people, follow Yushu Literature on WeChat, chat about life, and find confidence. Chapter 523. Su City Inner City, Elders Council. Long Yu and Long Ge had already entered the ancient castle under Fu Wanqing's lead. Su City's executive elder Jin Manning had already received the report and was waiting in the Great Hall with Guo Zixing and Fan Yinzhang. At this moment, Do Tianlu, Huo Lingjun, and Lu Ru had already secretly ordered the entire city to be on lockdown. If the 2 deity burial grounds entered the city and were to harm Su City, they naturally had to be prepared. Ancient Castle, Great Hall. Jin Mantang smiled and cupped his fists. Su City's elder Jin Mantang greets the 2 ancient Shu Taoists. Long Yu, Long Ge, greetings, Elder Jin. After exchanging a few words of greeting, everyone took their seats as hosts and guests. Jin Mantang did not beat around the bush and asked directly, fellow Taoists, why did you cross the continent to see Su City's great elder? Hee. Long Yu laughed. Elder Jin, we are truly sorry. We are under Xianming's orders to pass on an important message. Because of the importance of the matter, Xianming has ordered that we can only speak to Elder Su after seeing him. It is not convenient for us to speak to anyone else. Oh, Jin Manang pretended to be startled. Actually, the other party's words were already within his expectations. However, he did not know whether it was true or not. Perhaps the other party really had something important to say, or perhaps it was just an excuse. I will not hide it from you two. Jean Mantang was apologetic. Elder Su has always been in seclusion. He has not seen anyone for many years. I'm afraid you two guests will not be able to see him. Seclusion? Long Yu frowned. As a cultivator, he obviously knew what seclusion meant. Seclusion could not be awakened passively. One could only wait for the other party to come out of seclusion. Otherwise, the person in seclusion would suffer great harm. Then how long will it take for Sumo to come out? Longo asked. Hearing Longo call out Sumo's name without hesitation, Jean Mantang was slightly displeased. However, Jean Mantang's expression remained apologetic. I don't know how long. It has already been over 300 years. However, seclusion for 1,000 years might be possible. Upon hearing this, Long Ji's expression could not help but change slightly. They didn't have the time to wait here for 1,000 years. Hee hee. However, Long Yu sneered in her heart after hearing Jean Mantang's words, because he didn't believe that Sumo was really in closed-door seclusion. Back then, didn't they make 1,000-year promise under the Nether City? It was possible for Sumo to go into seclusion, but she would definitely not go into seclusion to the death. Seclusion, forgetting oneself and everything else, immersing oneself in the body. What if 1,000 years had passed in the blink of an eye? So, Long Yu smiled when he heard Jean Mantang, and then he said, looks like meeting Sumo isn't easy. You two really came at the wrong time, Jean Mantang said. Whether it's a coincidence or not, we'll know in a moment. Long Yu smiled faintly, and then he casually picked up the teacup in front of him and gently lifted the lid. Puff! Long Yu shook her head and gently blew. Who? In an instant, the entire hall turned into a rain of tea. To be precise, it was not a rain of tea, but a rain of swords. Because in the void, the specks were like swords, sharp and unrivaled. Sizzle, sizzle. Many items in the hall were directly pierced by the tea rain. The power of divine burial. Jean Mantang, Fu Wanqing, Guizixing, and Fan Yunchang were all shocked. However, none of them had the ability to stop Long Yu. Because among them, Jean Mantang, who had the highest realm, was only a deity tribulation. Deity tribulation, undying, divine burial, there was no need to mention the gap between them. Sort of tea rain. Long Yu was just showing a small part of his skill, nothing more. Since Jean Mantang said that Sumo was in closed-door seclusion, then he would try to force Sumo out. Who? Sizzle, sizzle. The tea rain was everywhere. In an instant, everything in the ancient castle hall had changed beyond recognition. Jean Mantang and the others wanted to speak, but they found that they were completely imprisoned. The imprisonment was very thorough. They looked at everything in a daze. Long Yu did not use any killing moves. In the eyes of outsiders, he only lightly blew on the tea and did nothing else. Jean Mantang and the others could not move. Longa looked at everything and felt it was a little funny. Sioux City cultivators did not accept a toast, only to be forced to drink a forfeit. That Sumo, she was just an undying cultivator, but she actually dared to put on a show. If it was not for Xianming's order, she and her senior brother really did not want to cross the continent to invite an undying cultivator. How powerful could he be? Did Xianming really need this person? Perhaps Xianming's move was unnecessary. Long Gu kept pondering and cursing in her heart. Long Yu was lightly tasting the tea. This tea is really good. Long Yu smiled warmly and purposely took 2 sips. However, at this moment, Long Yu's hand that was holding the teacup suddenly paused. Long Yu was stunned. That was because a power that could rival him had suddenly appeared. Who? Long Yu shouted softly. Crack! The teacup in his hand had already shattered. This unforeseen event was indeed not expected by Long Yu. Half a cup of tea almost splashed all over him. It seemed that Long Yu was somewhat laughably embarrassed. Long Gu was also shocked. What was going on? At this moment, a black figure gradually appeared in the middle of the hall. The figure was slightly thin, and his face was pale. However, half of his hair was black, and the other half was red. Sumo? This was Long Yu and Long Ji's first reaction. Because in their hearts, they had already tacitly agreed that Sumo was Sioux City's #1 expert. In fact, there was nothing wrong with this tacit agreement. Mid-stage, soul, burial realm. Then in their eyes, it could only be Sumo. Sumo, Longu shouted. However, that black-clothed man did not reply. Instead, he turned around and pretended to reprimand. Elder Jean, how can you use inferior tea to entertain an esteemed guest? Not even a tea set. As he spoke, the black-clothed cultivator waved one hand. In an instant, everything in the hall rapidly returned to normal. Yes, yes. At this moment, Jean Mantang and the others had already been freed. Bring more good tea and change the teacups, Jean Mantang hurriedly said. Outside the hall, cultivators immediately prepared new tea and teacups. Esteemed guests, please forgive us for our poor hospitality. The black-clothed cultivator cupped his hands at Long Yu and Longu with a smile. Long Yu had already brushed off the water stains on his body. He understood that the other party was giving him a taste of his own medicine. In the time it took for a cup of tea, they had exchanged one move. They were evenly matched. You two, this is Sioux City's Elder Long Yu. Jean Mantang introduced. Elder Long, these two are the envoys from the ancient Shu Xianming, Long Yu and Long Gu. The reason why Jean Mantang introduced Zhao Xiu as Long Yu was because Zhao Xiu had requested this 100 years ago. His original intention was not to forget the three realms. However, only he knew this reason. The people of Sioux City would not care about what name their elder changed. Moreover, the name Long Yu is indeed more domineering. Elder Long, nice to meet you. We are the same sect. Long Yu and Long Gu stood up and cupped their hands in greeting. They never thought that Sioux City would have a deity burying realm elder. Strength determined everything. As soon as the Long Yu appeared, they naturally put away their arrogance. Because the realm of the Long Yu is higher than Sumo's? Yes. If you want to talk about a hidden samsara with more like-minded people, follow Yushu Literature on WeChat, chat about life, and find confidence. Chapter 5:24. The God Burial Realm. The level of the dragon's saliva far exceeded Long Yu and Long Ji's expectations. With the appearance of the dragon's saliva, it would no longer be appropriate for them to use their strength to suppress Su Cheng and force Sumo to appear. That was because it was extremely possible for a great battle to break out if someone of the same cultivation level was suppressed. That was not their original intention. Fellow Taoists, do you wish to see our elders, Su? Long Si asked indifferently. In fact, the dragon's saliva had already seen everything that had happened before. It was appropriate for him to address Long Yu and Long Gu as fellow Taoists, because the dragon's saliva had already seen through their realms. Long Yu was at the middle stage of the buried god realm, while Long Gu was at the early stage of the buried god realm. That's right, Long Yu answered. We do indeed have an urgent matter to discuss with Elder Su. Something important? Dragon Saliva smiled faintly. He sighed softly in his heart. For the Dark Lord, there was really nothing important. The three realms had already been destroyed. What else could be more important? But Elder Su is really in seclusion. Dragon Saliva shook his head. We, the people of Sioux City, haven't seen him in 300 years. This matter is of great importance. Elder Long, please think of a way to pass the message, said Long Yu. Dragon Saliva smiled bitterly and shook his head. I won't hide it from the two of you. Back then, when Elder Su was in seclusion, he had said that it would take about 100 years. However, 300 years had passed. He never came out of seclusion. I have no way of contacting him, and he might not even be in Sioux City. Both of you are mighty figures of the God-burying realm. Why don't you spread out your divine sense to investigate? Elder Su was at least in the middle stage of Undead Realm. Take a look. Is there anyone like that in Sioux City? The dragon Saliva was telling the truth. Ever since that night, when she said she was going into seclusion, there had been no news of Sumo. In theory, the top floor of the castle was Sumo's abode. However, Long sure knew that the top floor of the ancient castle had been empty for many years. Dragon Saliva really didn't know where Sumo had gone. Long Yu and Long Gu indeed had the ability to search the entire city. Their divine senses slightly spread out, and in an instant, they already had an answer. Inside the city, apart from the three of them, there was not a single cultivator above the undead realm. Where was Sumo? Sumo had no reason to hide, because Sumo didn't know them and didn't know why they were here. As the Lord of Su City, Sumo would never avoid meeting them. Sumo was really not in the city. Longa looked at Long Yu and could not help but feel slightly disappointed. Although she didn't think that Sumo could really help Xianming, they were disappointed that they didn't get to see Sumo. "Are the two of you acquainted with Elder Su?" Dragon Saliva asked. "We've never met." Long Yu shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Why did the two of them cross the continent to meet our Elder Su?" Long Sputum asked again. "We have come under orders." Long Yu said. "Xianming's orders." Oh, when Dragon Saliva heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. "Xianming's order. Elder Su isn't here. If it's convenient for the two of you, you can wait for Elder Su to return. I can pass on a message on your behalf." This, Long Yu hesitated for a moment. This was a serious matter. Xianming had ordered that they couldn't speak of it without seeing Sumo. Of course, Long Yu wouldn't tell Dragon Saliva. However, what if Sumo wasn't here? Moreover, they didn't know where she went or when she would return. "Elder Long, are Sumo's array formations and puppet techniques very powerful?" Longa suddenly asked at this time. "Array formations? Puppet techniques?" Long Ji's question made Dragon Saliva slightly stunned. Actually, in his heart, Sumo was an unreachable existence. However, Sumo's realm had not recovered. Otherwise, he would still be the almost omnipotent Underworld Supreme. In my opinion, Elder Su is omnipotent. Array formations and puppet techniques are, of course, more powerful. Dragon Saliva understood. Even if Sumo had not recovered her previous realm, the array formations and puppet techniques should be relatively less restricted by the realm. Omnipotent? Long Gu heard Dragon Saliva's words and was stunned at first. Then, she couldn't help but pout, because Dragon Saliva's evaluation was too high. "Young lady, you don't believe me?" Dragon Saliva laughed. In his opinion, although Long Gu was at the early stage spirit burial realm, she was just a young lady who had not seen the world. Cultivators from immortal cultivation families all had a common problem. Their realms were generally very high, but their actual combat abilities were often very poor. After all, they basically wouldn't encounter too many risks. "I don't believe you," Long Gu said very directly. "Very good." Dragon Saliva smiled faintly and waved one hand. Whoosh! In an instant, Dragon Saliva, Jean Mantang, and the others disappeared. Long Yu's and Long Ji's expressions changed slightly, and Dragon Saliva's voice was heard instantly. "Both of you are from the ancient Shu of the Immortal Continent, so you must have secret techniques. You are now in a maze array. It was created by our Elder Su. I'll give you 6 hours. If you can walk out, come out. If you can't, I'll let you out." Long Yu's expression was slightly awkward. They had actually fallen into a maze array without paying attention. It was obvious that Dragon Saliva was very dissatisfied with Long Ji's attitude. This array was set up by Sumo. If they couldn't get out, it would naturally prove how powerful Sumo was. "How rude," Long Gu said angrily. "Hee hee." Long Yu laughed at that moment. "Junior sister, didn't you always doubt how powerful Sumo was? This time, your chance is here. If you can break the array, we can directly return to the ancient Shu continent." "Why?" Long Gu asked in surprise. "If even you can break Sumo's array, why are we still looking for him?" Long Yu said with a smile. "He naturally can't do anything about Xianming." "Umph." Long Gu could not help but snort coldly when she heard that. However, she still looked around very seriously. At that moment, Long Yu and Long Gu seemed to be in the depths of an empty starry sky. Everything around them was empty. In other words, their surroundings seemed to be full of paths, but there were no paths. Above their heads, there were many stars. Long Yu frowned, because his divine sense could be spread out, but it seemed to have fallen into an endless sea. Everything in this space-time actually had no end. Fortunately, Long Yu directly sat cross-legged on the spot, closed his eyes, and did not move. "Senior brother, aren't you going to break the array?" Long Gu asked. Hee hee. Long Yu shook his head and laughed. Junior sister, your attainments in array formations far surpass mine. If you can't break it, of course I can't break it. So, why don't I sit quietly for a while and think about how I can see sumo after 6 hours? And, makes sense, Long Gu said proudly. However, if I break the array, I don't need to see sumo. Long Yu smiled without saying anything. Long Gu was indeed better than Long Yu in array formations. However, Long Yu did not believe that she could break sumo's array. At that moment, Long Gu took 3 steps to her front, back, left, and right. However, nothing in the surroundings had changed. This did not conform to the common sense of array formations. Array formations relied on changes. 1 step changed, and 3 steps revealed the universe. However, sumo's array formation seemed to be a kind of silence formation. No matter which angle Long Gu looked at it from, she looked exactly the same. Long Ji's hands formed seals and started to cast all kinds of formation-breaking arts. However, it was still ineffective. Outside the formation, Long Yu stood with his hands behind his back. Behind him stood Jean Mantang and the others. In reality, that formation had only been set up in the hall. It was less than 30 meters in diameter. When Sumo had first set it up, she had only comprehended a little and did it casually. However, it had merged the star map of the 3 realms and the soul-storing altar. Therefore, it was another great formation. Long Yu believed that Long Yu and Long Gu could not break it. At this time, Sumo was stepping onto the top floor of the ancient castle. He had returned from the soul-storing altar. Chapter 5:25. The moment he returned, Sumo sensed something strange. The entire Sioux city was tense on the outside, but tense on the inside. The first layer of the castle's maze was completely activated. Dragon Saliva, Jean Mantang, and the others were all there. Inside the maze, there were 2 burial god class cultivators. One was in the early stage, and the other was in the middle stage. Sumo couldn't help but smile. This situation was quite interesting. At the same time, from the words of Dragon Saliva, Jean Mantang, and the others, he had a general idea. Ancient Shu cultivators? Sumo knew about the ancient Shu continent. But why were the ancient Shu cultivators looking for him? Sumo was not in a hurry. He quietly sat on the top floor of the castle and watched everything. Now that he was a break-world cultivator, it was easy for him to not be discovered. In the formation, Long Yu was sitting cross-legged. He really didn't break the formation. Meanwhile, Long Gu kept trying. This little girl was very stubborn. More than 2 hours passed, but she didn't seem to want to give up. The maze was like a maze. 1 wrong step, and she couldn't get out. At this time, Long Gu returned to Long Yu's side. Now, Long Yu was a coordinate. Although no matter where Long Gu stood, the scenery was the same. Only Long Yu's position was changing. Therefore, the Dragon Jade became the best reference. Every time she failed, Long Gu would return to Long Yu's side. After 2 hours, Long Gu returned to Long Yu's side. Long Yu opened her eyes and smiled as she asked, "Junior sister, how is it? Do you have an idea?" Long Gu didn't speak. She frowned and shook her head. Long Yu understood Long Ji's personality. Before 6 hours, Long Gu wouldn't give up. So, she didn't ask anymore and closed her eyes. As for Long Gu, her eyes were clear as she looked at the stars in the sky and the multicolored existences that were like clouds and mist. "These are 2 different worlds," Long Gu blurted out. Long Yu heard Long Ji's words and didn't care. After all, she was just talking to herself. Sumo, who was on the top floor of the castle, smiled. "Little girl, you have some skill. You can tell they are 2 different worlds." It wasn't easy. Of course, Long Gu couldn't hear Sumo's comments. From start to finish, she had indeed gained something in the past 4 hours. In her opinion, the bewildering formation was the fusion or superimposition of 2 small worlds. They were like 2 mirrors facing each other at an appropriate distance. You stand in the middle of the mirror and look to both sides. No matter how you looked at it, it felt the same, and there was no end to everything in the mirror. It should be said that Long Ji's speculation was correct. However, seeing this did not mean that he could leave the formation. because Longa couldn't deduce the steps taken to walk out of each world. In actuality, not to mention Longa, even a venerable one would not be able to walk out of Sumo's formation easily. Needless to say, if they were venerable ones, they would not have to walk step by step. With just one step, they would be able to step out. This was because they were completely unrestricted by time and space. A venerable was a completely different existence. But Longa couldn't. With less than a quarter of an hour left, Longji's forehead was already covered in fine sweat. In fact, she had already covered nearly half of the distance in one of the small worlds. Moreover, all the steps were correct. For an early-stage deity burial realm cultivator, that was already the limit. However, as Sumo watched everything, she knew that this little girl was still 108,000 miles away from leaving the formation. Not to mention 6 hours, she would not be able to leave the formation even after 3 days. Thinking of this, the corners of Sumo's mouth curled up slightly. Then he waved his hand lightly. Whoosh! According to her understanding, Longu took a step to the left. Previously, with every step Longu took, the surrounding scenery did not change. However, after taking this step, Longu could not help but be stunned. This was because she could clearly feel the changes in her surroundings. The colorful clouds were gone, and the stars in the void were even brighter. There was only one world left. Longu was pleasantly surprised. According to her speculation, even if it was the first world, it would probably take another hour to walk out. Unexpectedly, she actually walked out of a world with just one step. She turned around and saw that there seemed to be a layer of faint water vapor between her and senior brother Longyu. Senior brother, Longu called out. However, Longyu did not have any reaction. Very obviously, they were already in 2 different worlds. At the same time, Longu suddenly felt a slight fluctuation of spirit energy behind her. The figure of an extremely beautiful man appeared in front of her on the left. Longu could not help but blush slightly, because she really had never seen such a beautiful man before. Beautiful like a demon, peerless in his generation. In fact, at that moment, Longu was a bit dazed. Within the infinite worlds, there was actually such a beautiful man. That aura was peerless and outstanding. Unfortunately, that figure was fleeting and fleeting. That man was a soul body. Who are you? Longu instinctively asked. I am this great formation's erased spirit. The extremely beautiful man smiled. I have seen you wandering in and out of this great formation for almost 6 hours. Erased spirit? Longu frowned. This formation has a soul. Everything has a soul. Isn't that so? The extremely beautiful man smiled. Huh. Longu suddenly smiled. That's right. Then, if I control this erased spirit of yours, would I be able to leave the formation? Oh. The extremely beautiful man did not seem to think that Longu would think this way. Actually, it was not wrong. If Longu could really control him, she would definitely be able to leave the formation. But there was no such possibility. You can't control me, the extremely beautiful man said. I can try. Longu smiled. At the same time, her face suddenly became serious. With a shake of her hand, she directly used a treasure. It was a black and white kite. Break world-class treasure. Soul sealing kite. That was Longji's secret treasure weapon, specialized in dealing with all kinds of soul objects. This was also the reason why Longu dared to make a move. Dealing with soul objects was Longji's specialty. Flutter, flutter, flutter. The kite was like a big bird, flying towards the extremely beautiful man. Below it, a vortex of power formed, like a rock rising from the North Sea. Even within the array formation, that Dharma treasure was indeed extraordinary. Sumo, who was on the top floor, could not help but slightly nod. Inside the formation, the extremely beautiful man smiled warmly. His expression did not change at all. Longu was shocked, because the man was too calm and at ease. Looking again, the extremely beautiful man raised his right hand and gently pointed. That kite actually landed on the extremely beautiful man's fingertip obediently. Little girl, don't waste your energy. The extremely beautiful man smiled. I am the god of this formation. This kite, I will take it. When the time comes, I will send you out of the formation. Whoosh! Longu only felt a cold wind in front of her eyes. In an instant, the starry sky suddenly disappeared. And next to Longu, there was no longer that extremely beautiful array spirit, but an ordinary man in black with long hair. Great Elder! And the surrounding Sioux City cultivators instantly knelt down, because that man was Sumo. Chapter 526. Great Elder? Sumo. Dragon Pigeon was startled and could not help looking at Sumo in a daze. Just now, that array's soul was you. Longo asked. That's a part of my divine soul. Sumo smiled. Then, the ceiling soul kite appeared in Sumo's palm. It was only the size of a palm. Thank you, Lady Long. Sumo smiled and put away the paper kite. Longo blushed. She had wanted to subdue the erased soul, but now it seemed like it was just a dream. She and Sumo were not on the same level. Break world. Longo was a god burial warrior, so she could see Sumo's level. This was different from what she had heard about Sumo. According to Xianming, 300 years ago, Sumo was only in the middle stage of undying. Even though Sumo's cultivation speed was extremely fast, he was at most a soul-burying realm cultivator. But they didn't expect Sumo to be a break-world warrior. Long Yu and Long Gu were extremely shocked by this. Greetings, Elder Su. Long Yu stood up. He and Long Gu met Sumo again. Welcome to Sioux City, fellow Taoists. Su Mo cupped his hands in greeting. At this moment, Jean Mantang and the others tactfully left. In the hall, only Sumo, Long Gu, Long Yu, and Long Gu were left. Why are you two looking for me? You can say it now. Sumo smiled faintly. There's no one here that needs to be avoided. You don't have to worry. Sumo was referring to Long Gu. There was no need to hide. Elder Su, Long Yu's tone was respectful. Sumo wasn't just a city master. She was a break-world warrior. We are under the orders of Ancient Shu Xianming. We are here to invite Elder Su to the Ancient Shu. Long Yu's hands formed a seal. A small array appeared. Inside the formation, a light blue jade slip flew out. Pa! The jade slip gently exploded, and the figure of a female cultivator appeared. The female cultivator was wearing a light blue dress and had a blue veil over her face. Yu Wuji. Sumo and Dragon Saliva were stunned. That female cultivator was Yu Wuji. There was no mistaking it. However, they'd never imagined that Long Yu and Long Gu would actually have Yu Wuji's transmission jade slip on them. However, it was only a one-way image. Sumo, how have you been? Yu Wuji's voice was pleasant and his eyes were calm. I have established myself in the ancient Shu Xianming. There was a tomb here that was of great importance. However, its formation was complicated, and no one in the ancient Shu could solve it. Now, I've sent Long Yu and Long Gu to invite you. He could ask the two of them about the details. Come as soon as you see him. The message was simple, and there was nothing else. With that, Yu Wuji's figure disappeared. The light blue jade slip had long since turned invisible. It was a one-time thing. At this time, Dragon Saliva somewhat understood why Long Yu and Long Gu insisted on telling everything to Sumo. If it wasn't for Yu Wuji's message, they definitely wouldn't have believed Long Yu and Long Ji's words. And this jade slip had to be shown to Sumo. You are the emissaries of the Xianming? Then what is Yu Wuji's status in the ancient Shu Xianming? Sumo asked. The ancient Shu Xianming has a total of 5 alliance leaders. Every 500 years, they are elected. Each alliance leader takes turns to rule the Xianming for 100 years. 130 years ago, alliance leader Yu was elected as the alliance leader. 30 years ago, she started taking turns. Long Yu answered. Oh. Sumo and Dragon Saliva looked at each other. It seemed that in the past 300 years, Yu Wuji had made great achievements in the ancient Shu continent. What realm is she now? Sumo asked again. Late stage burying god. Long Yu said. Sumo nodded. Yu Wuji's cultivation speed was also extremely fast. Although back then, Yu Wuji was already at the undead realm, to be able to advance to the late stage burying god in 300 years was already shocking. It seemed that all the reincarnators of the three realms could not be measured by common sense. Once they awakened, their cultivation speed was far faster than ordinary cultivators. "What's the matter with the tomb that your alliance leader you mentioned?" Sumo asked again. Long Yu frowned, as if thinking about how to start. The ancient Shu continent is known as the immortal continent. This is because the ancient Shu continent is rich in spirit energy, and the cultivators there are quite talented. "I won't hide it from you, Elder Su. During my time on the chaotic god continent, I feel that the cultivators of the chaotic god continent cannot compare to the cultivators of the ancient Shu continent." Sumo and Dragon Saliva nodded slightly. "That's not all. The ancient Shu continent has always had some strange secret realms. That's why the cultivators of the ancient Shu continent like to explore and often find unexpected rewards. 70 years ago, Xianming discovered an ancient tomb in the center of the ancient Shu continent. It was an extremely large group of tombs. At first, Xianming didn't pay much attention to it. He thought that the tomb was just a bit bigger. However, as he dug deeper, he discovered that the tomb was very different. It was an extremely ancient tomb. Later, 2 burying god cultivators died while exploring the tomb. They died while exploring the tomb? Sumo frowned. What kind of tomb could cause the death of a burying god cultivator? That's right. Dragon Jade sighed. After decades of digging, Xianming was able to enter the core of the tomb, but the tomb was protected by extremely complicated formations. The ancient Shu continent has many cultivators who are proficient in formations. However, none of them were able to break the formations. Some of Xianming's formation masters have already fallen. Later, Alliance leader Yu personally went to the core tomb, but she couldn't break the formations either. In the end, she decided to have us invite you, Elder Su. Sumo frowned and nodded, then asked a few more questions about the tomb. Dragon Jade and Dragon Gu could answer some of the questions. However, they didn't know the most important ones. After all, there were cultivators in charge of excavating the tomb in Xianming. Dragon Jade and Dragon Gu weren't among them. In the end, Sumo nodded. "You've worked hard. I'll have someone arrange for you to rest at the post house in Sioux City. I've just returned to the city. I need to make some arrangements for Sioux City. 3 days later, we'll set off for the ancient Shu continent. What do you think? We'll follow Elder Su's arrangements." Dragon Jade bowed. Dragon Jade and Dragon Gu were taken care of by Jean Mantang and the others. In the hall, only Sumo and Dragon Saliva were left. "Dragon Saliva, what do you think?" Sumo asked. "Palace Master Yu is cautious and wise. If it's just a tomb for treasure hunting, even a venerable divine weapon won't disturb you. Just now, in the recording Jade slip, she said it was important, but she probably didn't say it clearly. The so-called important thing must be related to the 3 realms. Only something related to the 3 realms would make her send someone to find you. She wouldn't need to do anything else." "Yes." Sumo nodded. Dragon Saliva's words were exactly the same as his thoughts. About the tomb of the 3 realms. Sumo took a deep breath. What could it be? Was there a coffin in the tomb? Sumo's heart skipped a beat, but she couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 5:27. The 3 realms and 9 coffins had been destroyed. They had been destroyed even before the galaxy had been destroyed. Sumo understood that the 9 coffins would not appear again. In a sense, the 9 coffins were like the karma roulette. Karma was gone. Everything would come back. Everything was the same. Sumo calmed herself down and said to Dragon Sputum, "How is Sioux City? The foundation is complete. We will continue to improve." Dragon Sputum's answer was simple. However, Sumo understood what Dragon Sputum meant. As a Zune in the 3 realms, Dragon Sputum's power was enough to control an entire realm, let alone a city. Dragon Sputum did not forget Sumo's words. Sioux City was far from enough. However, Sioux City needed some time. Sumo nodded and said to Dragon Sputum, "Dragon Sputum, send it to all the elders in Sioux City. Today I will patrol the city." "Yes." Dragon Sputum bowed. Dragon Sputum made a hand seal and passed down the order. Sumo was patrolling the city. Its significance could not be compared to the usual patrolling of the city elders. This time, it was a demonstration of Sioux City's power. Sumo had become a break-world cultivator. This had to be announced to the chaotic gods continent. This was a form of intimidation. A break-world cultivator was an existence that could cover the sky in the chaotic gods continent. The bugle horn sounded. The entire city was silent. Elder Sioux had come out of seclusion. Elder Sioux had become a break-world cultivator. The news spread like wildfire. In an instant, it spread throughout the entire city. Whether it was the inner city or the outer city, everyone was in high spirits. Jean Mantang, Hualing Jun, Lu Ru, Fu Wanqing, Do Tianlu, Gua Zixing, and Fan Yinchang were all wearing golden robes. They floated in the air above the castle. Behind them were 300 soul transformation realm cultivators. It could be said that all of Sioux City's elites were out. This kind of power was enough to make the entire southern region tremble. Looking again, Sumo was in front and Dragon Sputum was behind. Both of them wore long black robes. However, their styles were slightly different. Dragon Sputum stood next to Sumo, but in front of the other elders. Dragon Sputum was above tens of thousands. This was something that everyone would admit. Cannons sounded, drums sounded, the bugle horn sounded. It shook the heavens and the earth, piercing through thousands of miles. Congratulations, Elder Sioux, for reaching the world-breaking great path. Congratulations to Elder Sioux. Congratulations to Sioux City. Within the city, shouts rose and fell, and cultivators filled both sides of the void. It could be said that the streets were empty, and this grand occasion was unrivaled. The cultivators of Sioux City prostrated themselves in the air. Sumo was the faith of everyone in Suchin. After 300 years, Sumo had broken through the barrier and returned. How could they not be excited? Sumo didn't say anything else. However, his gaze was firm and filled with strength. He looked at every corner of Sioux City, and his eyes fell on every cultivator in Sioux City. He wanted to give strength to everyone in Sioux City. One day, he would need these cultivators to fight for him. Sumo's break world pressure spread out. To the Sioux City cultivators, it was not a lock or a suppression. It was a transmission of power and belief. Elder Sioux, stay with us. Su Chung is invincible. Unify the chaotic gods. An unknown cultivator suddenly shouted in the void. Such words could not be spoken carelessly on the chaotic gods continent. There were thousands of sects and factions on the chaotic gods continent, and no one had the power to do so. Whoever dared to say that they would unify the chaotic gods would be the first to be destroyed. For tens of thousands of years, the chaotic gods continent had been embroiled in countless battles. However, a cultivator in Sioux City shouted such words. There seemed to be a moment of silence. There was only the sound of the wind in the air. Perhaps no one expected someone to shout such a slogan. However, only a split second had passed. Sioux City is invincible. Unify the chaotic gods. Another cultivator followed suit. 1, 2, 3. Countless. The shouts shook the sky and reached the southern region. Sioux City is invincible. Unify the chaotic gods. Long Yu and Long Gu were watching everything from above the post house in Sioux City. They couldn't help but be shocked. Although the cultivators in Sioux City didn't seem very strong to them. However, that kind of fighting spirit and conviction was extremely frightening. Sumo's Sioux City, from a certain point of view, was impregnable and could be called upon to fight. Sumo has the air of king. Long Yu seemed to be talking to himself, but also to Long Gu. None of Xiaming's alliance leaders can compare. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse to let such a person go to the ancient Shu. Sigh. Longa nodded silently and didn't say anything. Sumo's patrol was not fast. She had seen both the inner and outer cities. Then, they headed straight for Dragon City, which used to be Mengdu, which was 30,000 miles away. There was only one elder stationed in Dragon City, and that was Kong Fongzi. That day, after Sumo destroyed Dream Capital, she left Kong Fongzi and his disciples behind. Since then, Kong Fongzi had been ordered to stay in Dragon City. News of Sioux City's patrol had already spread to Dragon City. Kong Fongzi wore a golden robe and waited in the air with 100 soul transformation cultivators of Dragon City. 30,000 li was neither too far nor too short. This time, Sumo's patrol was mighty. Along the way, countless southern region cultivators prostrated themselves on the ground. Many factions wanted to submit. That was what Sumo wanted. He wanted to pave the way for the dragon saliva. He would unify the southern region without bloodshed. Kong Fongzi led the cultivators to kneel and shouted, "Greetings, great elder." Sumo's expression was solemn as she nodded slightly. Then, she waved her hand, and the cultivators all stood up. World-breaking power. The hearts of the cultivators shuddered. They had never seen a world-breaking cultivator before. In front of them, Sumo was like a god. Fortunately, Sumo was their guardian. Almost all the cultivators of Dragon City had witnessed Sumo's battle to destroy the city. It was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. Su City was invincible and unified the chaotic gods. That day, that voice echoed for 30,000 li in the entire southern region. Everyone in the chaotic gods continent knew about Su City's heart. Therefore, the Su City Patrol became the turning point of the entire chaotic gods. After that, the dragon saliva used swords and blood to cut through all obstacles for Sumo. 3 days later, on the top floor of the castle, Sumo and the dragon saliva stood with their hands behind their backs. Dragon saliva, I will give you Peach Heaven and the life and death puppet. They can help you expand your territory and unify the chaos gods. Sumo took out a jade scroll and gave it to the dragon saliva. The method to control them is in the jade scroll. Thank you, Holy Master. The dragon saliva accepted the jade scroll solemnly. At the same time, Sumo slapped her bag of holding. Whoosh, Peach Heaven and the life and death puppet stood on either side of the dragon saliva. These two god-burying puppets could definitely become the two most powerful fighters for the dragon saliva. There are some pills and celestial fruits in this bag of holding. They can help you reach the world-breaking realm sooner. Sumo gave the dragon saliva another bag of holding. The dragon saliva took it again. Guard the chaotic gods and wait for my return. Sumo said, we still have to go to the underworld city's promise of 1,000 years. Then, we will unite the pure land. Yes, the dragon's saliva bowed. At that moment, his half-red, half-black hair danced in the wind. Sumo's gaze was even more distant and deep. Chapter 528. The Ancient Shu Continent, the Continent of Immortals. The 3 continents of the Pure Land were shaped like a third of a circle. In terms of area, they were about the same. However, they were in completely different states. The white bones were barren and soulless, and the chaotic deities were bloody and chaotic. Only the Ancient Shu Continent was full of immortals. The Ancient Shu Continent had many rivers, mountains, and fertile plains. If someone were to look down at the Pure Land from a void, they would discover that the Ancient Shu Continent was colorful and could be said to be the most beautiful. On this day, Sumo, accompanied by Long Yu and Long Gu, crossed the Heaven Trench and set foot on the Ancient Shu Continent. The moment she set foot on the Ancient Shu Continent, Sumo felt that the Ancient Shu Continent was extremely rich in spiritual qi. Although the density of spiritual qi here was not as high as the Tian Fu Continent and the Nine Nether Continent, it was far better than the White Bones Continent and the Chaotic Deities Continent. The Ancient Shu Continent truly lives up to its name. Su Mo sighed in admiration. Compared to the White Bones Continent and the Chaotic Deities Continent, the Ancient Shu Continent is indeed a real cultivation place. Long Yu said, he was right. There were many ancient cultivation families in the Ancient Shu Continent, and they all benefited from the unique advantages of this continent. Sumo nodded. In fact, at this moment, he was a little curious. Who was it that created this pure land world? How did its layout come into being? Was it also the god that the cultivators of the Nether City talked about? Elder Su, the closest teleportation portal to the Ancient Shu Continent, is 300,000 miles away. Since we have arrived at the Ancient Shu Continent, it won't make much of a difference. Why don't we take a slow journey and show Elder Su the scenery and people along the way to the ancient Shu continent? Long Yu said, the guest follows the host's wishes. Sumo said with a smile. Therefore, the three of them didn't use any magic treasures, but directly rode the wind. On the ancient Shu continent, there were very few mortals. Therefore, riding the wind was the norm when they traveled. The place where they landed was the mountain in the north of the ancient Shu continent. Beyond the mountain was a plain. This plain is called the Red Dust Plains. It was the largest plain in the northern part of the ancient Shu, with a circumference of millions of miles. It is now managed by the three great Hongshan families of the ancient Shu. Red Dust Plains? The Hongshan family? Sumo didn't quite understand. The so-called red dust plains refers to the fact that most of the cultivators here are red dust cultivators. Cultivators at the immortal realm weren't allowed to open their cave abodes and cultivate here. Of course, it's not a problem if you're just passing by. As for the Hongshan clan, they don't have any cultivators above the God-Grave realm. In their clan, the highest level cultivator was at the undead realm. That's why they're called the Hongshan family. What if someone in their family reaches the God-Burial realm? Sumo asked. Once someone in the clan reaches the God-Burying realm, the entire clan becomes an eternal clan. They needed to move their entire families to where the undying families lived. And the closest place was the Immortal Mountain Range. There are currently 4 great undying families there. Long Yu introduced. Oh, Sumo nodded with interest. Then above the Eternal Clan is the Reincarnation Clan, right? Hee hee. Long Yu nodded with a wry smile. In theory, that's right. Unfortunately, there are no Reincarnation Clans on the ancient Shu continent. Currently, the strongest cultivator on the ancient Shu, as far as I know, is Break Realm. To wait for reincarnation, that's a long time coming. In the entire ancient Shu, the Hongshan clan occupies more than 80%, but there are differences in size. What position does your Long family have among the Eternal clans? The Eternal Long family is one of the 7 great Eternal clans of the ancient Shu. In the central region of the ancient Shu continent, there are 3 mountains and 4 rivers under my Long family's jurisdiction, covering an area of millions of miles. In the ancient Shu continent, the Long family is a first-rate family. Long Yu's words were as humble as possible, but he still couldn't hide the pride in his heart. Indeed, the Long family had the right to be proud on the chaotic God continent. The Long family was one of the founders of the ancient Shu continent. Otherwise, Yu Wuji wouldn't have asked the Long family to invite Sumo. The 3 of them chatted as they walked. However, it was basically Long Yu and Sumo talking. Long Gu rarely interrupted. In fact, ever since Sumo appeared, Long Gu didn't say much. She seemed to still be immersed in the shock that Sumo's beautiful divine soul brought to her that day. Riding the wind and admiring the scenery, it was indeed pleasant. Soon, the 3 of them arrived in the sky above a city on the Hongshan Plains. Cool. That was the name of that city. Cool City is an important city in the northern region of the ancient Shu continent. When we first went to the chaotic God continent, we also passed by this city. Elder Su, let's go into the city to rest for a while. Us martial brothers and sisters will do our duty as hosts here. Otherwise, when we get to Xianmeng, I'm afraid we won't have a chance. Sumo smiled and nodded. The 3 of them directly landed in Cool City. This was an immortal city, and there were many cultivators coming and going. At the same time, the 3 of them controlled their realm at the middle stage of the deity Tribulation Realm. This was considered to be above the middle stage. Therefore, they didn't attract too much attention. Cool City, Nihon Restaurant. According to Long Yu, this was the best immortal restaurant for refreshment. It was a 3-story restaurant. It had an antique feel to it, and its style was quite elegant. There weren't many customers, because this Nihon restaurant had an unwritten rule. That was cultivators below the deity Tribulation Realm didn't have the right to eat and drink here. In fact, this wasn't the original intention of the Nihon restaurant. However, its standards were higher and later became a custom. Cultivators below the deity tribulation realm didn't come here. Sumo and the other two were led by the waiter to a single room on the top floor. Long Yu had been here before, so he was familiar with the place and directly ordered wine and dishes. The wine was naturally immortal wine. The rest were, of course, delicious spirit food. Speaking of which, Sumo hadn't eaten and drunk in a restaurant for a long time, because at his level of cultivation, sitting in a restaurant was purely for rest. No matter how good the spirit food was, it didn't have much meaning for his cultivation anymore. In an instant, a table full of spirit food was served, looking and smelling good. Long Yu introduced them one by one, and Long Gu occasionally interjected with a few words. Sumo also tasted the special delicacies of the ancient Shu continent. On the whole, it felt very good. Between different continents, there was still a big difference in spirit food. The three of them exchanged cups and chatted casually. Sumo's understanding of the ancient Shu continent further deepened. And at this moment, another three cultivators came up to the third floor of the restaurant. The moment those three cultivators came up, Long Yu couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and the wine cup in his hand paused slightly. Then Long Gu also frowned slightly. All of this, of course, was seen by Sumo. Without going out of the room, Sumo's divine sense spread out slightly. Looking at the three cultivators again, there were also two men and one woman. The two male cultivators both had middle-aged appearances and looked almost exactly the same. Moreover, they both wore gray robes. There was a faint brilliance between their eyebrows. There seemed to be an imprint there. It was obvious that they were a pair of twin brothers. At the same time, Sumo noticed that the cuffs of their gray robes were embroidered with a strange rune, not the Shu character on Long Yu and Long Ji's cuffs. And that kind of rune, Sumo had never seen before. The other female cultivator, dressed in a red long dress, had fair skin and an enchanting figure. Looking at her face, her appearance was extremely beautiful and full of charm. However, there was a long scar on the left side of her cheek. That scar made the female cultivator show a kind of evil flavor in her beauty, although they also suppressed their realm to the middle stage of the deity tribulation. However, Sumo and the other two could see their cultivation base. 3 burial gods. This was a special existence on the red dust plains, because they did not belong to the mortal world cultivators. Even if looking at the entire ancient Shu continent, the burial gods were absolutely first-class existences. The 3 guests of Yin clan. Long Yu and Long Gu both knew these 3 burial gods. Their origins were very unusual. Chapter 529. Yin 3 guests? Hearing Long Yu's words, Sumo looked at her with a questioning look. At the same time, Sumo laid down a small bysema. The 3 burial god cultivators would not be able to find them. 3 grave robbers. Before Long Yu said anything, Long Yu coldly humphed. Grave robbers? Sumo was slightly taken aback. A burial god ranked grave robber? That was truly unimaginable. Long Yu heard this and laughed. Elder Su, don't listen to her. The 3 guests of the Yin family couldn't be considered tomb robbers. They are top-class array masters and good at grave robbing, but they are not thieves. On the ancient Shu continent, all the ruins, secret places, and graves are ownerless. If you have the power, you can take them. There are no restrictions on this. Oh, Sumo was surprised. Ancient Shu Xianmeng does not make arrangements? Haha, Long Yu shook her head. Xianmeng is the ruler of the ancient Shu continent. But unless it is a large grave, Xianmeng does not make arrangements. Plus, every continent has some special existences. On the ancient Shu continent, there are 3 families that do not join Xianmeng. They should be 3 powerful families, right? Sumo said with a smile. Sumo understood that any special existence had to have power. Yes, Long Yu had a wry smile. They're all immortal families. Each family's power is like the 7 immortal families of Xianmeng, but they are in the southern area of the ancient Shu continent. They're called the 3 southern families. They're the Cold Mountain Yin family, the Red Desert Gu family, and the Sky Lake Chu family. These three big families all have break world-class cultivators in charge. That is why they do not join Xianming. The three families have an alliance, but compared to Xianming, it is very loose. However, the three of them are quite powerful, and they don't do anything out of line. Therefore, a delicate balance was formed between Xianming and them. They are not under the control of Xianming, and they have robbed a lot of resources from the ancient Shu continent. Therefore, many cultivators in Xianming are hostile towards them. After Long Yu finished speaking, Sumo understood what was going on. The Yin clan, the Gu clan, and the Chu clan were a force apart from Xianming in the ancient Shu continent. The entire ancient Shu was not completely unified under Xianming. The Cold Mountain Yin clan controls the entire Cold Mountain range in the southern region of the ancient Shu land. Everything within a radius of 300,000 miles was under its jurisdiction. The Yin family's secret techniques were complicated but profound. The so-called three guests were the cream of the crop. The twin brothers were named Yin Fu and Yin Shou. Her name is Yin Meijiao. The three of them are half-siblings of the same father, but different mothers. They travel all over the world and never separate. Their attainments in formations and talismans are extremely profound. They can be found in the famous historical sites and tombs on the ancient Shu continent. However, they have disappeared for many years. It is said that they may have gone to the Bitter Wheel Sea to look for the so-called ancient treasures. Now, it seems that they have just returned to the ancient Shu continent, just like us. After listening, Sumo nodded. Long Yu, do you think that their return this time has something to do with the central tomb that Xianming wants to excavate? Most likely. Long Yu nodded. The three guests of the Yin clan are top-notch grave robbers. Hee. Long Gu sneered, what top-notch? I can also go to those historical sites and tombs that they went to. In terms of formations, they may not be better than me. Long Yu looked at her junior sister and smiled without saying anything. Sumo couldn't help but look at Long Gu. Long Gu remembered that she couldn't get out of Sumo's maze at all. She couldn't help blushing and didn't say anything. Long Gu and I have been traveling back and forth between the two continents for more than 3 months. Long Yu continued. The Sanin clan must also know about the situation of the central tomb. That's why they mobilized the experts of the clan to return. After all, no one knows what's in that tomb. It seems that it's better for us to go back earlier. Sumo said. Yes. Long Yu nodded. The two reached a consensus. Long Gu naturally obeyed the arrangement. Therefore, the three of them were not in the mood to eat and drink. They directly paid the bill and left the restaurant. However, the moment the three of them walked out of the private room, the three guests of the Yin clan raised their heads almost at the same time. At the same time, they looked at each other and then watched the three of them leave the neon tower. Just now, they didn't notice that there was someone in the private room next to them. Xianming's people. Yin Shou frowned. The clothes of Long Yu and Long Gu directly showed their identity. On the ancient Shu continent, only Xianming's people were qualified to wear that kind of green robe. On the Red Dust Plains, it's not strange to see Xianming's people. However, those are two god-burying cultivators. Their status in Xianming is not too low. Yin Fu said, God-burying cultivators are not strange. Yin Meijiao smiled. This smile was supposed to be charming, but when she touched the scar on her face, it looked a bit strange. That black-robe cultivator is the powerful one. Yin Fu sneered. That's right. Yin Meijiao nodded and said, those two Xianming god-burying cultivators are only at the middle stage and the early stage. However, I didn't see the black-robed cultivator's cultivation level clearly. A world-breaking cultivator. Yin Fu and Yin Shou said at the same time and looked at each other. A world-breaking cultivator walks in Qingliang City in the Red Dust Plains. Hee. Yin Meijiao shook the wine cup and then drank up the fairy wine in her hand. There is only one possibility. Either he left the ancient Shu continent, or he just came back like us. He must have come back. Yin Fu said with certainty. The clan has already said it. A few months ago, Xianming stopped digging the tomb because no one in Xianming could break the formation of the ancient tomb. I heard that the current alliance master of Xianming, Yu Wuji, is from Jiuyuming City. So, she has sent someone to ask for help. A Nether City cultivator? Yin Meiju smiled again. Look at that black robe. He is a bit like Nether City. However, a strong dragon cannot suppress a snake in its own land. I don't believe that even a world-breaking cultivator from Nether City can turn the world upside down in the ancient Shu. Big brother, where are Gu Xing and Gu Yu? And how are the Chu brothers? They're already on the way to the central tomb of the ancient Shu. 3 days later, let's meet at the peak of Tianshui Mountain. Everything is going according to plan, Yin Fu said. That's good. Yin Mei Jiao said, in a while, let's try that black-clothed cultivator. Let's see if he is a tough nut to crack. Don't go too far. Yin Fu said, Xianming and our 3 families have never fallen out. We all know that Xianming is far more powerful than us. Little sister, you have to know your limits. Don't lose the big picture for the small. Big brother, don't worry, Yin Mei Jiao said. I just want to see his strength so that I can know what to do. Once we meet in the tomb, it will be a life-and-death battle. So, it's better to get to know him. Yin Fu and Yin Shou both nodded. Yin Mei Jiao was right. Therefore, the 3 of them did not stay for long. After a while, they left the Nihong Tower and left Qingliang City. They went in the same direction as Sumo and the other 2. They all went straight to the nearest teleportation formation, Northern Ancient City. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.